Have you ever gone to war with a family member? Who won? The moment I met him, it was clear that my stepdad hated me, but I had no idea how far he would go to hurt me. His only mistake was that he raised my stepbrother to have a conscience. My dad passed away when I was 15. My mom and him weren't particularly close at the time, so while his death hit me hard, she wasn't as fazed as one might expect. I joined the military when I was 17, and during my first year out of the house, my mom remarried. I never really connected with my stepdad. We had polar opposite personalities. He often made snide remarks, telling me to man up whenever I was upset about any inconvenience. This led to many arguments between us, but I never would have imagined how far he would take it. 5 years after my mom and stepdad offered to let me move in, I was medically discharged from the military. I told him it was on my feet confused, but it was his house, so we came to an agreement. I kept this from my mom, assuming he did not want her to know, as he never mentioned it around her. He had a son from a previous marriage. Like his father, I didn't share many interests with him either, but we got along fine, and he was a good guy. They paid for his schooling, his car, and his living arrangements through college and beyond. I didn't need the help, but it felt unfair that he received all this assistance and I was immediately asked for rent. I moved out after 3 months, and not long after, I met a girl with whom I fell deeply in love. We began dating, and this was my first relationship. I was overjoyed the entire time, as if caught in a constant early relationship haze. Introducing her to my family made me nervous. My mom and I were very close, and I feared she might judge my girlfriend harshly. These fears proved to be unwarranted. They got along incredibly well. My girlfriend, who didn't really have a family, was warmly welcomed by my mom and stepdad. They became like her second parents. This bond seemed to bring my stepdad and I closer, something I hadn't realized I wanted, financially, and it meant a lot to me. Fast forward to about 3 months later. I received a call from my stepdad asking me to come over. I complied, and when I arrived, I found my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, and fiancé there. My fiancé looked as if she had been crying. I thought someone had died and I moved to sit next to her, but my stepdad stopped me. He began accusing me of cheating on her throughout our relationship. I was puzzled and protested my innocence. Apparently, a woman had contacted my fiancé claiming that we had been sleeping together for over a year. This woman claimed to have evidence of our alleged conversations and knew personal details about me that a stranger wouldn't. I begged my fiancé to check my phone and verify that I hadn't done anything wrong. Both she and my mother were crying, and I started crying too. My stepdad called me every name he could think of and told me to leave, threatening to call the police if he ever saw me on his property again. Over the next few weeks, I tried to contact them but to no avail. After that time, my stepdad called me, telling me to stop trying to contact my ex-fiancé and warned me never to come near his family again. Despite repeated attempts, I was unable to reach my mother either. A month later, all I received from her was a heartbreaking text expressing her disappointment. My stepdad's family, with whom we used to spend holidays, shunned me as well. Seeing their Christmas pictures on Facebook, with my ex-fiancé present and seemingly in good spirits, crushed me. The only family who would talk to me at all were my dad's brother and his family. However, even they seemed wary of me. My uncle was the only one who truly believed in my innocence. His support kept me going. He provided me with the fatherly love I had been missing, and for that, I have never been more grateful. About 6 months later, I moved from the East Coast to California, feeling the need to escape it all. Almost a year after my move, I received a call from my stepbrother. I hung up on him at first, but when he called again, I decided to answer. The conversation was awkward to say the least. Then he told me something that seemed to break and fix everything all at once. He told me that my stepdad had manipulated the situation, hired a woman to claim that she and I had an affair, and forged messages to send to my fiancé. He admitted that he had known this for a month and couldn't keep it to himself anymore. He planned to tell my mom and my ex-fiancé the next day and called me first to decide what to tell them about me. I asked him not to let them contact me immediately, so I had some time to digest everything. After my stepbrother's revelation, a wave of emotion swept over me. There was confusion, relief, but most of all, anger. I finally had the truth. Something I could use to restore my tarnished reputation, and to expose my lying stepfather. With my uncle's guidance, we decided to reveal my stepdad's despicable scheme. He connected me to a highly reputable lawyer friend of his, who was stunned by my story and agreed to represent me without any fees. We filed a defamation lawsuit against my stepdad and began gathering every piece of evidence we could. Meanwhile, my stepbrother confessed everything to my mom and my ex-fiancé. The aftermath was explosive. My mother, feeling betrayed, promptly filed for divorce. She made it her mission to expose my stepfather's true colors. He was ostracized from our community, left to bear the weight of his horrendous actions alone. Both my mother and my ex-fiancé reached out to me, filled with remorse and guilt. They begged for my forgiveness and asked for a chance to fix our relationship. It took some time, needing to heal from the wounds, but eventually, we started rebuilding our connections, stronger and more understanding than before. My ex-fiancé and I decided to take a step back and start fresh, this time at a slower pace. Despite everything that had transpired, our love for each other had not wavered, and we were eager to heal and move forward together. That highly anticipated day took a horrible turn for the worst. My girlfriend left me on the day I was proposing without any explanation. Elise and I had been together for 3 years and living together for 1.5 years. Our relationship was very strong and we were madly in love. All of our friends always used to say that we were a perfect couple. Our communication was strong and we had everything planned in our lives. I told her that I won't be marrying her before I get a job that pays well enough to build our family, and she agreed. Well, I got a very good job 2 months ago and we started planning our lives together. Our plan was to get married in the next year or two, buy a house, and then have kids when we have more financial stability. She also started dropping hints that I should propose. I was already planning to propose, so I started researching rings, proposal venues, etc. This is when I contacted Leah and asked her to meet me and keep it a secret. I told her my plans and she confirmed that Elise would love this and also gave me some suggestions which I loved. Leah also included David, as the three of them were best friends since childhood and knew each other very well. They also helped me pick the ring. The plan was to rent a Kickstead a lot. I rented the cabin and on Friday I took the day off without telling my girlfriend. I met up with Leah, David and one of my friends to set up everything for takeout. We talked about her day and then went to bed. Now a week ago Leah had invited Elise for brunch on Saturday, the proposal day, at a fancy new place which was the proposal location. She emphasized that the place was fancy so that Elise wouldn't get suspicious of Leah asking her to wear a nice dress. On Saturday morning Leah and David came to our apartment to pick up Elise. As soon as they left I called a friend of mine who was waiting just around the corner and I left soon after. Called my other friend who was supposed to be at the cabin and asked him how everything was going. He assured me that everything was set up exactly how I wanted it. I had also asked David to share their location and to drive slowly or take a longer route so that I can get there 15 minutes before them. I realized David hadn't shared the location but it was fine. We got there and I just ran in to change into a suit. Then I went to the exact position and checked the camera angles. Everything was perfect. Then I waited for my girlfriend and her friends to arrive. The drive is 30 to 40 minutes from our apartment and they should have been there. I thought they went slightly overboard with stalling. I waited there for another 20 minutes. It had already been more than an hour since they left the apartment and I was getting worried. So I asked one of my friends to call David and sneakily ask how long it'll take them. They called him 3 times, but no answer. Then they called Leah 3 times. No answer. I assumed the worst. I called David and Leah as well. Still, my heart was racing at this point. As soon as I called her again, Leah answered instead. I was panicking and asked her if everything was alright and asked why nobody was answering the phone. She wouldn't want to see my face or talk to me ever again. I was confused, but before I could say anything she hung up. I was so confused and started crying, so my friends had to console me. Soon after that, I got a text from Leah that she'll be coming over later with David to get Elise's stuff. She says that Elise doesn't even want to step into the apartment, even if I'm not there. I immediately called her parents to ask what was going on. They knew about the proposal and we were supposed to go to their home for lunch after the proposal. They had no clue what was going on and told me that they'll call her and ask. I got a call from them 10 minutes later saying that they called Elise and she told them that she can't talk right now. They were also confused about all this. I was devastated and I didn't know what to do. My friends took me back to my apartment and we hung out. David and Leah came over in the evening to take Elise's stuff. My friends and I tried to talk to them but they didn't say anything. They just asked me where Elise's stuff was, took some of it and said they'll be back for the rest. They also reiterated that if I tried contacting Elise again, I'll be reported for harassment. At that moment I just wanted to cry because just the thought of me harassing my girlfriend was overwhelming. After they left, my friends told me that I shouldn't be alone right now and they were staying the night. They wouldn't take no for an answer. We stayed up and talked till 4 AM last night and then everyone went to bed. I wasn't able to sleep and I've just been thinking about every potential reason for Elise's behavior, but I don't have any answers. The only scenario I can think of is that Elise was cheating on me. Maybe somehow she realized I was gonna propose and she freaked out and told her friends that she can't do this because I cheated on her. This still doesn't make sense, but it's the closest thing to an explanation I have right now. I know it's a horrible thing to think about. Today was supposed to be the first day of our engaged life together. Hopefully, I'll be able to get some answers from her parents if they talk to her. What did you do in high school to piss off your teachers that wasn't against the rules? When I was in 11th grade, I had a pre-calc teacher who was a little bit of a jerk. He made students come up to the whiteboard and solve equations. If the student got it wrong or couldn't solve it, he scolded them in front of the whole class. So, obviously, I sat in the back of the class every time and made as little noise as possible to stay out of this guy's radar. But unfortunately, on this fateful day, I was chosen to become his next victim. I walked up to the whiteboard, got handed a red marker, and was told to solve an equation he wrote on the board. I looked at the problem really hard, hoping my inner Asian power would conveniently awaken to save me from this situation. Unfortunately, it seemed like my American education system uprooted such powers from me. I turned around and told him that I didn't know how to solve it. Then he scoffed, as if to look down on me, and told me that we covered this area last week and that if I had paid more attention I would have been able to solve it. To be fair, we did cover it a week before. However, given that I was only a teenager, I got pretty upset by the way he embarrassed me in front of the class, so I decided to play a little prank on him. I put the cap back on the marker, and as he turned around from me I pretended to draw a line on his back. Then, as he faced me again, I took the cap off swiftly so it looked like I just drew a red line on his white shirt. I said oops while trying to maintain a straight face so he wouldn't notice that it was only a prank. Then he yelled something like, "Kay, what the hell did you just do?" Honestly, I don't remember exactly what he said because I was focusing on not laughing, but I remember how he seemed more pissed off than I anticipated and this made it even better. I sat down and tried to keep a straight face throughout the yelling. At this point the whole class was dead silent, confused. The teacher, veins now popping, continued yelling, "What did you do?" At this point I'm trying my absolute best to take him seriously, but then he started spinning around trying to see the mark, like a dog chasing its own tail. That's when the class caught on to what I did and soon, the ridiculousness and hilarity of the situation dawned on the class. Everyone was holding back their laughter, for laughing now could spell doom. I bit down on my lip hard to prevent my mouth from forming a crooked grin. Whenever I felt like I could not prevent my grin from forming, I turned my head sideways so the teacher could not see me. But as I turned my head to the left, I saw the kid next to me pinching his thighs as if he was tearing a piece of flesh off. No good, that made me want to laugh more. I turned my head to the right, and the kid to my right was shaking so violently that I thought he would have shaken his shoulders right off. That almost got me, but I kept it together. Somehow, seeing how everyone was trying their hardest not to succumb to the try not to laugh gauntlet was intensifying the hilarity. So I closed my eyes, took deep breaths, and tried to enter a zen state. Then I heard the kid in front of me coughing violently, each cough obviously hiding an escaped chuckle. Oh my god, I thought to myself. Will somebody please laugh first so I can escape from the purgatory of not laughing? Then someone farted. That's when I cracked. I could no longer withhold my urge to break out laughing and began wheezing for air. Like a domino effect, the rest of the class followed my lead. The teacher did not like this. Just as I was about to come clean, he quite literally grabbed my collar and dragged me to the principal's office. There, he started explaining to the principal how I messed up his perfect white shirt and that I should get suspended for this. But no matter how loudly he tried to explain, the principal kept looking confused. Because there was no mark. Despite the principal's confusion, the teacher kept insisting that I had drawn a red mark on his back. He even went as far as to say that there was something wrong with the light inside the office and that's why she couldn't see it. I was sitting in the guest chair of the office, watching this whole thing, without being able to contain my laughter. What made it even funnier was how students from my class, and even other classes, were there. They crowded the entrance to the principal's office, to watch this deranged man yell about an invisible mark on his back. Good times.
Nerds, have you ever felt bad for your bully? In 9th grade, I signed up to be a tutor and was assigned to one of the worst bullies in school, Jared. In our first lesson, I discovered he was illiterate. He knew the alphabet and could spell his name, and that was about it. I also learned the reason he was so much bigger than most of the other kids in our grade was that he'd been held back 2 years already because he couldn't read, and if he didn't get at least a C in English, he'd be held back again. He'd already decided he was going to fail, and he was so angry and frustrated, and now embarrassed because I knew. That first lesson was basically him ranting about how stupid and pointless the tutoring was because it was just for half an hour on Wednesdays and that wasn't enough time to learn anything. So I told him he was probably right, but we took the same bus home, just a few stops apart, so I could come over to his place every day after school if he wanted to study more. He blew me off for a while, and then he cornered me in the library during lunch hour and said something like, "Fine, but if you tell anyone, I'll end you." I got permission from my parents, and starting the next day, I went home with the guy. Now, to be clear, my own home situation was a little chaotic. My parents fostered, so there were always a bunch of kids, some with special needs, aged infant to teens. My house was always kind of noisy, kind of cluttered. It didn't bother me to see day-old dishes or a messy room, but this kid's house was wall-to-wall open beer cans, rotting food, cigarette butts, and used diapers. The youngest kid looked to be about 6 years old, but was still in diapers. This was a 2-bedroom house, with the 6 kids segregated by gender into the 2 bedrooms and dad sleeping in the living room in this gross nest of beer and dirty clothes. I have no idea if there was a mom in the picture at all. Dad did not know I was coming over and started yelling, and Jared snapped back about how he had a group assignment and we had to work on it together. Dad goes off for what felt like forever about how I'm going to have to do all the work because Jared is an idiot, good for nothing, useless piece of trash. Finally we are allowed to retreat to the bedroom, which stank of piss. There were 2 bare twin mattresses for 3 boys to share, and I didn't want to sit on either of them, so I stood while he sat and we went over his reading workbook for a couple hours before I went home. Again, he told me not to tell anyone about his house or he'd destroy me. I told my parents what the house was like, and they told CPS several times. However, to my knowledge, CPS never got involved. The kids were fed and there was running water, so there was no immediate concern for CPS. Next day, Jared tells me his dad says I can't come over anymore, so I tell him we can always go to my house to study instead. There's just as many kids, but it's a little quieter. He says no, but when we get to his bus stop, he doesn't get up and doesn't let me get up either, so we go to my house. My parents are surprised, but they flow with it. Jared and I do the tutoring thing until dinner time, and Mom asks him if he wants to stay. He says no that night. He says yes the next night, and that turns into a daily thing. He stays well after dark every day. Some days we're putting kids to bed before he'll finally go home. He only lets my dad drive him if it's snowing or raining. I'm about 80% sure that there were a couple nights when he just slept in the tent the little kids kept in the backyard as a fort. One stormy afternoon, we have a minor chicken coop related incident and he actually offers to go slogging through the crap with me mending a fence. Afterwards, we dig out some dry clothes for him and he gets a shower while Mom washes his clothes, and that also turns into a regular thing where every so often, he shows up with a bunch of dirty clothes in his school bag and takes a shower at my house while his clothes get washed. We don't hang out together at school. He's saying dumb shows. His grades improved across the board. He still got in fights and bullied other kids at school, but instead, teachers, have you ever secretly changed a student's answers on a test? I started student teaching in a 4th grade class in September. My teacher told her students that if all 12 of them get 100% on their spelling tests, we can have a pizza party. So far, that has not happened yet. This past Monday, my teacher told them, "This is Miss K's last week with us. Let's all work really hard to finally get that pizza party." The kids were really excited. During their free time, they would all study their words. I never saw them work so hard. What makes this situation difficult is the bullying between Gabby and Sam. Sam has severe dyslexia and struggles with spelling. Gabby constantly picks on Sam this seriously and intervene. However, Gabby still picks on Sam. After my teacher said, "Let's all work really hard to finally get that pizza party," Gabby shouted back, "Can you make sure that Sam studies since she's really bad at spelling?" We addressed this with Gabby. Even though she is only 9, she pisses me off with her passive-aggressive comments. Sam practiced really hard for the spelling test. I even stayed after school Thursday to help Sam study. On Friday morning right before the test, Sam was crying because she didn't want to be the only student to fail and ruin the pizza party. I told her that she worked so hard this past week and she is smart. For the spelling test, our teacher will say the spelling word out loud and the students will write it. 11 of the students have the same words. Sam has a slightly different set of words which are a bit easier. My teacher whispers Sam's words to her. When the teacher does this, Gabby will sometimes snicker. I can't stand this. We addressed this before, but Gabby still doesn't change her behavior. I finally lost it. This past Friday, Gabby snickered again. I went up to Gabby and angrily whispered, "I will take your test and fail you right now if you don't stop. And you will ruin the pizza party for everyone. Stop it." She started crying in her seat. I didn't care. Maybe it will finally get through to Gabby. Once the kids are done, I walk around and collect all the tests. The kids go to lunch, and my teacher gives me the tests to grade. She leaves for lunch duty. I start grading each test and it's 100% after 100%. I am so proud of my students. I got to Gabby's test and it's 100%. I finished grading and every single test is 100%. I feel so proud and excited for them. But then I realized, I only collected a at my teacher's desk. I went through her test and she had spelled all the words correctly. I never felt so proud. But then, it hits me. The very last word, which is always a challenge word, is spelled wrong. She wrote because as the QAs. I am still proud of her because she got 9/10 correct. She never scored that high before. And sight words are very challenging. But all the students will figure out that Sam ruined the pizza party for them. Even if we don't announce who failed, they will figure it out. I could talk to my teacher about letting them have the pizza party anyway, but my teacher is a stickler for the rules. She would just say, everyone needs to get a 100%. I can't let Sam feel like a failure or get bullied. So, I erase the U and the A and switch them. Sam probably won't notice. And I won't tell Sam or she will feel bad. She will eventually learn how to spell because in the future. Honestly, even I mess that one up every once in a while. I needed her to have her moment. The kids came back from recess and were told the good news. Pregnant and my husband has been sleeping with my mother. I have found out my 30-year-old husband is sleeping with my 52-year-old mother. I honestly don't know how to react. I'm 4 months pregnant and I'm trying not to stress since it's bad for the baby. I honestly had suspicions about my husband cheating. When I announced my pregnancy, he seemed happy. He was kissing me and telling me how lucky he was to have me, but now he changed. About 2 weeks after my surprise announcement, he stopped hugging me and kissing me like usual. He stopped eating the meals I'd make for him after work and said he already ate some fast food or something. I also noticed he had changed his lock screen, which was a picture of us. Not sure if that meant anything, to be honest. I was suspicious, so I went through his phone while he was in the shower and found text messages, videos, and pictures. I'm sick to my stomach thinking about what I saw. I saw pictures of my mom in lingerie and he was replying with pictures of his member, and lots of dirty talk. I even saw a message of regret. He had said that maybe they should stop since he didn't want to hurt me, but my mom said I wouldn't get hurt as long as they kept it all a secret. But what angle? I'll quote it here so anyone reading this can get an idea of how serious their affair is. More than you think. You've helped me through the passing of my beloved ex-husband, and for that I truly thank you. I know it is hard for you to keep a secret like this. It is for me too. I love my daughter with all my heart, but she will have to accept eventually that love is love and that the heart each other. I thought that ever since my husband died, nobody would ever love me because I'm just an old woman, but you have shown me to love myself and made me feel young and attractive again. Let's keep having fun and cherishing each other. I think it's important to know my father passed away about 5 years ago from a stroke, and my mother said she refused to get back into dating or romance because my father is her forever love and only and only. I'm crushed, and it's the fact that I know they slept together after that message become home until 1 in the morning due to work and paid overtime. I actually threw up after reading that message. I have screenshots of the numb. I'm confused. I'm hurt so bad. I can't even cry because I refuse to believe it. I had to confront my husband about it. I confronted my husband when he came home from work. I told him that I know everything. I showed him the pictures and messages. At first, he denied, but when I showed him the evidence he started crying. Crying. Actually crying. He had the nerve to cry and get on his knees while holding and caressing my stomach. He told me that I would be a bad mother if I left him and raised my child without a father because a baby needs a dad in their life to fully grow mentally and physically. What a load of crap. I told him that I was contacting a lawyer in order to file for divorce. I had already packed my things before he came home. I'm currently staying at a local motel. I'm getting everything sorted from there. My husband has been blowing up my phone with messages and apologies. He's told me that if I take him back, he won't do anything to hurt me ever again and he will cut all ties with my mother. As for her, I messaged her once I got to my motel. I told her I was pregnant and that she will never get to see her grandchild. I have chosen to cut all ties off with my mother. She messaged me just a few hours ago and what she said infuriated me. I'm so sorry for the pain and hurt I've caused you. It was never meant to go this far. I love you so much, with every inch of my heart, but you are not the victim. How dare you hold this against me and take away my right to see my one and only grandbaby? You are cruel. If you do this, you will forever live life regretting. Please do not do this to me. I am your mother, I love you. I have ended the relationship. We are no longer on speaking terms. Please push past this. A child cannot be raised without a father or grandmother. I love you. Please call me. I don't know if I will ever be able to forgive her.
What is your worst? I looked away for 1 second story. It took only 2 seconds of me looking away for my son to give himself a life-threatening injury. I had just finished changing my 6-month-old son's diaper, with him lying on the couch, with a changing cloth underneath. I turned to throw the diaper in the trash right next to the couch, and in the 2 seconds I didn't have my hands on him, he rolled off the couch. He'd never even rolled over before. He hit the ottoman, which spun him back the other way, and he smacked his head on the hardwood floor. He cried, but calmed down after a few minutes. There was no sign of swelling, no blood, or any signs of damage. We were worried about a possible concussion, so we kept a close eye on him the rest of the day. When it was time for us to go to bed, we decided to stay up and watch a movie instead, and I went in and checked on him partway through the movie while my wife went to make some popcorn. I changed his diaper, and he woke up a little. One of his pupils was overdilated, and the side of his face had started to droop like he was having a stroke. We immediately grabbed our diaper bag, jumped in the car, and drove to the hospital, which fortunately was only 10 minutes away. I walked into the ER carrying my son and told the nurse that I thought he was having a stroke. She checked him, took us to a back room, and within minutes the room was swarming with medical personnel. A doctor informed us that it looked like our son had cracked his skull internally, and there was swelling in the brain. They would need to perform open cranial surgery immediately to relieve the pressure on the brain. The doctor told us that they weren't sure he would survive the surgery, but it was the best option. We were whisked into another room, separated, and asked questions about exactly how the injury had happened. They wanted to make sure it wasn't due to abuse, because they said that falling off the couch onto the floor shouldn't have had the force to crack an infant's skull. At this point, his mom and I were both sobbing, just trying to figure out what was going on and whether our son was going to be okay. When they finally finished interviewing us, they brought us into a waiting room. I called my parents to tell them what was happening, and then another doctor came to tell us that the surgery had gone well, but that they'd had to remove around 2/3 of his brain tissue due to the blood saturation damage. He showed us an X-ray or MRI they had done just before actually beginning cutting that showed what looked like a crescent moon of gray matter clinging to the left edge of the interior of the skull, with the rest of the image filled by blackness, which the doctor told us was blood. He advised us that even if he survived the rest of the night, our son would likely never learn to walk or talk. When the surgery was done, they brought him to us. He was still groggy from the anesthesia, but other than being fussy, he seemed otherwise like his normal self. Of course, there was also a large incision wound, stitches, and tubes coming out of his head to drain off the excess fluid. It was around 2 a.m. at this point, but I called our religious leader, who I was also good friends with, to tell him about the situation. He came and prayed with us, and offered a blessing for our son, just that he would make it through the night. He survived the night. He survived the next week, and the next month, and every time the doctors saw him, they said it was a miracle that he was alive. He had mild seizures for a few months after the operation, and when he first started to crawl, he would sometimes just stop and freeze for a second or two for no apparent reason, but remarkably, the remaining 1/3 of his brain matter that they left grew to fill the rest of his brain cavity. The blood vessels from the left side of his brain spread and grew all the way across to cover the right side where the original vessels had been destroyed. He learned to talk and walk within the regular timeframes, and has had no noticeable residual effects of his traumatic injury. When we took him back to the hospital 6 months later for his final post-op checkup, every one of the nurses said it was a miracle that he was even alive, much less talking and moving around like a normal 1-year-old. Students, what did you do when you caught someone cheating off of you? I made sure they all failed the class. It was a particularly tough business information systems class during my undergraduate education. The students in this class were mostly non-technical business majors, so this new material wasn't at all similar to anything we'd learned in other classes. Needless to say, most of the students were struggling, including me. I still had a 4.0 in college at this point and I was willing to put in max effort to keep my stellar GPA. I started studying hard. I made my own Quizlet sets, I read the book every night, I finished assignments a week early, and I did outside research. After grinding it out in this class for about a month, I was working on an assignment in a room designated for quiet homework time, and that's where our story begins. Several other students from my class were there and working on the same assignment I was on. Judging by the size of exasperation, the irritated whispers, and requests for help, they weren't having much success. Having studied relentlessly for a month, I was having an easier time of it. I sit like L from Death Note when I take tests so I can focus better. Because of this, one of my classmates tapped my knee and asked for my help. I wanted to go get some water, so I told him I could do that and I'd be right back. I returned a few minutes later to find what I can only describe as a bunch of busy bees happily working away. This was strange since they were hopelessly stuck 2 minutes before, but whatever. My classmate tells me he figured it out without me. Now, I'm not an idiot, so I know the 5 people in this room probably copied my work off my computer when I went to get water. Scumbag move number 1. But as it turns out, no one in the class needed help the next day or the day after. Whoever in the study room had stolen my work had forwarded it to most of the class. Scumbag move number 2. I don't mind being helpful, but I hate being used, so I made a plan to get back at the people who had stolen my work. It didn't take long to organize my plan and carry it out. Here's how it went. I changed an answer on the next assignment by multiplying by -1. $1,500 became -$1,500 on this question. The next week, I left my computer in the same place as before and went to get water, just like I had done the week before. 75% of the people in my class of 40 people put -$1,500 as the answer to question 3, which was definitely incorrect. This next part surprised me, but my classmates began insisting the class was unfair, too difficult, or rigged and launched these complaints at our professor. One day after class I had the following exchange since I was the last student out of the classroom. My professor asked me, "Jason, do you think this class is too hard?" I replied, "Honestly, this class is hard, but if people spent as much time studying as they did complaining, they'd be fine. They really need to just get to work." I thought the same. Being right in front of him, I decided to tell him about the mishap. "Professor, I also happen to know that most of the class incorrectly copied my work on the last assignment. Question 3 should be a net income of $1,500, not a net loss of $1,500. I put down the wrong answer initially, everyone copied me, and then I changed the answer later. I think you can reasonably conclude that anyone with -$1,500 as the answer cheated off of my incorrect work," he sighed. "I figured they all copied, but I didn't know you were the source. Anyway, thanks for your candor and your dedication to the class. I didn't cheat, so I don't know what happened to those who did, but depending on the class, they would either get a 0 for the assignment or a plagiarism citation, so they got one of those. But I wasn't done yet. I began studying relentlessly for the midterm. This class was difficult, and no one was expecting anyone to score over 75%, so all my classmates figured the weight of the test would be adjusted. My plan was to wreck the curve and deny everyone the adjusted weight by producing a sufficiently high score. I recruited a classmate who hadn't stolen my work to study with. Together, we aimed to score high enough that our professor couldn't adjust the weight of the midterm. Fast forward to test day, and I'm ready to go. I know since most of the students are business majors, they need 70% to pass the class because it's a required course. Hurting them on the midterm will go a long way in helping drop their grades. I take the test, I'm the first one done, and I leave pretty sure I've done enough to deny the class the exam weight adjustment. A week later, we get our exams back. Tests are distributed all around me with scores on the top in red ink. 68, 71, 70, 66, 75, 67, and these are the smart students. Someone on the end of my row takes a test from our professor and lets out a sigh as he begins passing a test down my row. It stops on my desk. 93%. I've won. Some dweeb in the front of the class asked, "So, is there going to be a curve?" My professor responded, "Nope." I jokingly asked, "What was the high score?" 93%. Average score for the exam was 71, so a good number of people didn't get a passing score. Maybe they made up for it on the final and passed, but I don't care. That is what I call a freaking win. It's the most bone-chilling thing a loved one has said to you. When my son looked me in the eye and said, "Yes," it shattered my entire existence. When I was 20, my high school girlfriend got pregnant. We were just kids ourselves, but I was determined to man up and do right by her and our child. We got married and had a son together. The first few years were incredibly difficult financially and emotionally, but we made it work. I dropped out of college and took any job I could to provide for my new family. I often worked multiple part-time gigs just to scrape by. But coming home to my son's smiling face made all the hardship worth it. He was the light of my life. Sadly, after about 8 years of marriage, I caught my wife cheating. As painful as it was, I filed for divorce. I was awarded 50-50 custody of our son, who was about 7 at the time. Having him half the week helped me push through that devastating heartbreak. Being a single, working dad wasn't easy, but I was committed to giving my son the best childhood possible despite the circumstances. Every moment I had him, I devoted myself fully to him, playing catch, baking cookies, camping in the backyard, visiting museums. Money was perpetually tight, but we made magical memories nonetheless. His beaming smile and toddler laughter were priceless to me. He'd often spend weekends with my parents too while I worked, and they adored him as well. Things were going fairly smoothly until my son turned about 11. That's when his mother started dating a new man who was quite wealthy and would shower her and my son with fancy trips, expensive gifts, and extravagant activities. Understandably, my modest home and schedule couldn't compete with decadent vacations and non-stop entertainment. My son began requesting to stay with his mom more and more, until he was only coming over maybe one weekend a month. This stung deeply, but I tried to be understanding. I knew preteens are swayed by material things and fun experiences. But I missed my buddy terribly and sensed him pulling away. My calls to ask about his life went unreturned for longer periods. After about 9 months of this distance growing between us, my son stopped coming to stay with me altogether. No more weekends, no more phone calls, just a chat. My heart shattered. I spent months pleading with him and his mother to see me, to no avail. In desperation, my family helped me hire a lawyer to sue for parental alienation. But the judge ruled against me, even ordering me to pay more child support to my ex, despite losing access to my child. Then out of the blue, my ex's lawyer approached me with an unbelievable offer. He would make the child support payment stop if I voluntarily terminated my parental rights. I was stunned and hesitant at first. But they arranged for me to speak privately with my son, with both lawyers present, to determine if this was really what he wanted. When I asked if he wanted me to give up being his dad, he looked me right in the eyes and said yes. No emotion, no hesitation, as if I was a stranger asking for directions, not his father of over a decade. It gutted me. But I went through with signing away my rights since it was clearly his wish. My whole world felt crushed. In the painful months that followed, my son never reached out to me or my family again. Not so much as a text or birthday card. The total abandonment sent me into a spiral of severe depression and alcohol abuse. I nearly drank myself to death before getting sober, with great difficulty. After intense therapy and treatment, I was finally able to move forward with my life, though that profound hurt lingered in my soul. I relocated back to my hometown and rebuilt, new job, new healthy habits, even finishing my degree. After some years had passed, I met an incredible woman who helped me believe in love again. She had an 11-year-old son who also needed a father figure. I was very cautious interacting with him initially, given my past trauma around parenting. But this boy, Alex, truly was a gift. His warmth and spirit melted my hardened heart. We bonded deeply and soon became inseparable. When Alex turned 18, he asked me to officially adopt him since his own dad had disappeared when he was 5. It was one of the most emotional and proudest moments of my life. On paper, I finally had the son I'd lost all those years ago. In the following years, my wife and I had 2 more children of our own. My career also took off, allowing me to provide the stable, loving home I always dreamed of giving my kids. I became a devoted father of 3, making up for missed time. Out of the blue, when my oldest biological son was 26, he showed up at my door calling me dad and wanting to reconnect like no time had passed. I shut the door in his face, refusing to let him shake the family I'd rebuilt. After much convincing from my sister, I reluctantly agreed to meet with him just once in a public place. I simply explained I cannot resume a relationship, then politely wished him well and left. Surprisingly, I felt only indifference seeing the stranger. In that moment, I realized I had finally made peace with that trauma from so long ago. The door was closed for good. Perhaps in time, limited contact with my younger kids could occur, but reopening my past wounds is not an option. Protecting my wife and children's well-being comes first. My sister thanked me for the closure I gave my estranged son, and I surprisingly felt free of the bitterness I once carried. There is power in moving forward and breaking cycles. Am I the a-hole if I uninvite my sister-in-law who's in love with my husband? My husband and I met each other at a ski lodge 9 years ago. I was with my young daughter and a female friend and her child. My husband was with his 2 brothers and 3 sisters and a few friends. There was a singing competition and both of us were set up by our friends to enter it. Sparks flew during our duet and the rest is history. This was the first time I caught on to my sister-in-law's disturbing behavior. After the singing competition, he and I went to the cafe to chat. His middle sister, Tina, who was adopted at birth, came storming up to us and demanded he come back to their group. She never looked at me and whined when he shut her down. She ran off crying and apparently took her sister's room keycards and locked them out so they had to stay with the friends in their room. Fast forward to when we bought a house together. We had a housewarming and invited family and close friends. Tina showed up in a SI Club outfit. She ignored me the entire time and hung all over my husband, boyfriend at the time. She kept recalling tales of them when they were little and how close they were. She'd kiss him on the cheek, hug him, and touched his arm when laughing. He was visibly uncomfortable so I stepped in. At first, I just thought she had a crush on him, but the way she was acting looked like she was the girlfriend and not me. She was going around reminding/telling everyone that he used to say he never wanted to have kids, but now he's playing daddy to my daughter. One of my friends said she thought Tina was weird for talking about how hot his modeling photos were when he did print work back in college and that her favorite photo was of them at a beach in Hawaii during a family vacation a few years back. The most bizarre thing she told a few people was that he had never dated a woman of color before and now all of a sudden he's in love. It's only bizarre to me because she's biracial, so I don't know why this would bother her, unless she's jealous of me because she wished she were me. Then things go south at the end of the night when he gets down on one knee and proposes to me. She started crying and ran to the restroom. Their dad went to check on her and then drove her home. I knew exactly why she was upset, but my husband always equated her behavior to jealousy because she never had healthy relationships. After that tantrum, she skipped our wedding, baby shower, our children's birthday parties, and other family events that we attended. I was fine with extending invitations because I knew she wasn't going to show up. She had some sort of mental breakdown and was in and out treatment for years. I wish nothing but the best for her and I don't know what kind of issues she's going through, but I don't want her disrupting our peace. I'm currently pregnant and our baby shower is at the end of this month. I'm having it a few months early because I'm at risk for going into labor early, like I did with my other 2 children. My mother-in-law called to RSVP and stated Tina would be riding with them and if it was okay if she brought her new boyfriend. I was surprised because we hadn't seen her in years, but I was apprehensive to agree. Eventually, I did agree and hoped that she resolved whatever caused her so much distress when she was around my family. Well, it took all of 24 hours for her to start her nonsense. She texted my husband paragraphs at 3 a.m. telling him how she felt about our family. First, she went on to say how much she missed them being close and how I came in and destroyed their close relationship, when I barely said 50 words to her in 9 years. She asked him if he was happy with his life because again, he used to say he never wanted kids or to get married. She then asked if he thought about her all this time and if he could meet up with him before the shower and talk alone, face to face. That was the last straw for me. I asked my husband if he knew she was in love with him and he just shrugged and said he didn't doubt my theory. Apparently, when she was 11, she asked if they could cuddle and kiss and he said no. He admits her behavior since then has always been weird and dramatic, but he didn't pay her much attention because there were many siblings and they all hung out all the time. I asked him if he could uninvite her and this new boyfriend because I think she's going to bring drama to our baby shower. He said he wants to talk to his parents first to see what kind of state she's been in, but I know in my gut that she's ready to ruin our day with her theatrics. So am I the a-hole for wanting to uninvite her to the baby shower?
I came back home this morning after spending the night at a nearby hotel. I didn't feel safe staying alone in my house, since she had a copy of the keys. Even though I have a surveillance system, I didn't want to take the risk. The first thing I did when I came back was call an emergency locksmith and explain the situation, and they arrived and did the job swiftly. I felt so much safer knowing that she couldn't get in anymore. I checked the house, but I was exactly as I left it yesterday, and after checking the surveillance tapes I was sure she didn't pay me a visit. I informed my close neighbors about what happened, and they were very understanding and helpful. I then met up with a mutual friend, and she updated me on the talk she had with her. She told me that she visited her at home this morning because she wanted to talk to her face to face since she thought I was a little bit overreacting. Well, she went, my best friend greeted her and they started chatting a little before she invited her in. So far so good, until they sat down and my best friend asked her if they could keep talking while she pumped because she needed to get her supply running. Our mutual friend played dumb, saying that it wasn't a problem, but she asked why she needed to pump if she didn't have children. She replied back saying that she indeed has a daughter and that she was surprised that I didn't tell the mutual friend about it. She then pointed out that it was my daughter and that even if she didn't give birth to her she still considered her as her baby too, and that she needed mama's milk to grow healthy. Referring to herself, not me, as mama. She kept going saying that she had no choice but to pump because I was being sassy and inconsiderate and I wasn't letting her breastfeed our baby, but that she couldn't be inconsiderate like I was and she needed to get her supply to a sufficient level, but that she was sure that I would change my mind in no time since I'm not stupid and I know that her melons are better for our daughter. She told me that she couldn't believe what she was hearing and that she couldn't believe that all of this was true. But what shocked her the most was the fact that she was indeed lactating. She wasn't producing much but she was indeed pumping melon milk. She tried to talk to her but it wasn't any use, she just wasn't listening. And after a while trying she just said that there was nothing wrong in what she was doing and that she was just being a good mother, and after that, she asked her to leave because she needed to relax while pumping. Unfortunately, she forgot about asking for the keys to my house, but fortunately, I was able to change the locks this morning. I honestly wasn't surprised hearing all of that. But still, it was very, very depressing. She was completely shocked and she couldn't understand what happened, since apart from this she seemed completely normal. I then asked her to accompany me to the police, and unfortunately, there aren't any extremes yet to file for a restraining order, not even a temporary one. According to what they told me where I live, solid proofs of harassment, stalking, etc. need to be presented, and the surveillance tapes/texts don't show harassment or clear evidence that she's stalking me. So the only thing I could was file a formal complaint of what happened, and did that. They told me that they would keep an eye on the situation, and they would check my neighborhood more frequently to be sure nothing happened. I also booked an appointment with a pediatrician, and I will get my daughter checked next week. I need to get my stuff together, plan what to do next, and take care of my daughter. Fortunately enough my parents are coming to help me, and I'm really relieved. I don't think I can keep facing this situation alone.
Married people, what crazy way did you meet the love of your life? The story of how my wife and I met. Most people think we alter our story, but it is 100% true. In my small hometown of Athens, Alabama, with a population of only around 20,000, Walmart was the place to go for most of your needs. Especially if you needed more than groceries. I was in Walmart one evening browsing the electronics/music section when I caught a glimpse of this absolutely stunning girl walking by. I was 18 at the time, out of high school, but still painfully shy, as I'd always been. However, I was at once smitten and really wanted to talk to her, so I did what any painfully shy 18-year-old guy would do, and followed her, at an overly cautious distance until I could hopefully maneuver around to accidentally meet her face to face, as approaching from the rear, as much as I was enjoying the view, was ridiculously intimidating. I tried hard. I failed miserably. She apparently didn't find what she was looking for and I obviously discarded any need to further browse the CD section as soon as she left. I'd begun pursuing. So out the front doors of the store she went, and in, and if she knows what I'm doing she'll call the cops move. I followed still, maintaining a careful distance. Into our cars, out of the parking lot, and down the road. At this point, I began to question my own sanity. I pushed myself to make either a firm commitment that, if she does stop somewhere else, I will actually speak to her, or to go ahead and drop this madness, and just turn around. If she does stop and I do follow, what if she recognizes me from Walmart? Won't that be an instant ew? Go away? But I don't think she actually saw me, at least not in a way that would register that I followed her. She turned into a convenience store. I followed. I'm definitely going to talk to her, I thought to myself. I let her go in a few moments ahead, then followed. I entered the door and sure enough, she's got a drink in her hand and is walking back to the front of the store. This is it. Face to face. I look up and our eyes briefly lock. Her eyes. Oh my god. I'm absolutely stunned. They are the most intriguing greenish, grayish color. Ridiculously unique and captivatingly beautiful. I know the look on my face had to look exactly like someone who had just seen a ghost. I smile sheepishly, nod, then walk to the back of the store, feign interest in whatever drink I end up buying, and watch as she drives away into the night. Failure. Utter failure. A few weeks later, I was at work and got a call from a longtime friend whom I hadn't heard from in quite some time. He owns a small sporting goods store in town and says he has this girl working for him who in his words is trapped in a relationship with an older guy who doesn't treat her too well. He knows I've dated some good-looking girls. I wasn't as shy when I was properly introduced, it's just the whole cold approach that terrified me. He wanted to know if I'd come try to steal her away and save her. Not exactly how I like to start a relationship, but it sounds like fun. What 18-year-old guy doesn't like a good challenge, right? The next day I take my lunch break and head to his store. I walk in and ask if Steve is in, the clerk goes in the back to get him and I walk over to the baseball caps. I hear Steve's voice as he approaches, talking to a female, but I can't really make out what they're saying. He walks through the swinging door, I walk over to shake his hand, but when the door swings back open the other way, I stop dead in my tracks. Was that? Surely not. I look nervously back and forth from Steve to the door. Just a moment later, she walks through. Those eyes. It was her. I give myself a pep talk, knowing I'll be bolstered by having a mutual party to break the ice. Game on. You got this. She's every bit as beautiful as I remember. Our eyes meet again and this time I smile as Steve introduces us. She holds out her hand. A handshake? It's different, I guess. I can deal with that. I grasp her hand, lightly but tight enough to control the duration of our touch. I hold my gaze into those eyes as I hold her hand. It's nice to meet you, I say, infinitely more confidently than it reads here. Her name is Casey. Then, as my eyes quickly take note of the rest of her face, and I release her hand, my rememberer begins skittering back many years. I've seen her before. Way before I followed her from Walmart to the gas station. In my head, gears whir and bells clang as I search through my internal index of faces from my past. Then the mechanics grind to a halt. The school bus. First grade. First grade? Out of my mouth, before I've given any real thought as to how the ensuing conversation might go, gush the words, "Did you go to East?" Which is one of the county schools. But I knew she didn't go to East, I did. I went there from kindergarten until graduation, and I most certainly would have known if Casey had gone to East. I scramble back through my memories for more details, as her reply comes. No. I went to Clements, she replied, which is another of the county schools. Clements was on the exact opposite side of the county. Yes, there is a west, but it's farther northwest than Clements. In an instant, clarity. There was a little girl who rode the same bus I did, but only for a year. She was in kindergarten when I was in first grade, and she cried. Every single day. She would cry to stay with her mother. I remember now. That little girl's name was Casey too. I had often wondered what happened to Casey. This was long before homeschooling was an option for kids who just didn't want to go to public schools, so I had assumed they had moved, but in my mind, of course, they went much farther than the other side of the county. I remember on many occasions offering her something, anything she wanted, from my lunchbox, to try to make her feel better. I hated to see her cry. You didn't go to East, not even in. I began, before she finished my sentence saying, in kindergarten. I did. How did you? And you rode Mrs. Walker's bus. Right. You cried, every day. I remember. That was you, wasn't it? Stunned, she stared deep into my soul. Yes. Did you? Were you the boy that? Yeah. I hated to see you so upset. One thing led to another and now, a full 13 years into our marriage, I still hate it when those beautiful greenish, grayish, eyes shed a tear. And yes, I later told her about the Walmart incident, which she found incredibly endearing, thank God. Students, what's the most insane interaction you've witnessed between a teacher and parent? In my junior high school we had a Vietnam vet for a science teacher named Mr. V. He was the kind of dude you just could sense had his crap together in times of panic. In the 3 years we were there, I almost never saw him do more than crack a calm smile. Then, in 8th grade, this girl, Amy, who showed up late to our first period class every day and was kind of quiet, didn't show up at all. For some reason instead of marking her absent, he called the office and had a very quiet conversation. He looked visibly disturbed and shaken. The next day, the girl showed up to class just a bit late, but with a broken nose, a black eye and her jaw wired shut. Even though this was 25 or so years ago, I can still see the look on Mr. V's face when he saw her. It was pure murderous fury. He was lit on fire inside. And even more terrifying, he pulled her into his office, had a calm conversation with her, and sent her to the nurse. He then told the rest of us that nobody was to say anything to her about it as she'd had an accident and was embarrassed. Most people didn't care. Quickly the rumors spread. Ridiculous things like, "Did you see Amy? Jesus, somebody kicked the crap out of her," or "I heard it was because she was screwing Mr. V and his wife found out." So on and so on. I happened to be passing the office on my way home that night and I saw the principal, 2 police officers, Mr. V, and Amy in there with the door shut. She was crying. One of the police officers noticed me looking and pulled the blinds. I normally walked home, so I waited. I think school got out around 2:30 or so, and I usually hung around with some friends to listen to music or play basketball for 30 minutes or whatever before I started walking. I waited outside the front of the school until almost 4 p.m. Finally, a car pulled up and this dude gets out looking freaking pissed off. He is swearing to himself, and as I'm the only one out there he says, "You? Where's the office?" I just pointed. But he didn't make it to the door. The 2 cops came out quickly, one in front and one behind. The one who approached the guy started telling him to calm down. This angry dude just loses his crap and starts screaming, "My damn daughter should have been home an hour ago and I had to leave work because of you pieces of crap. I'm gonna sue and blah blah blah." Basically just furious. The cops are trying to calm him down. Then out of nowhere Mr. V comes out the side door of the office, his face lit like the fires of hell, and he just straight up goes full horizontal, 4 feet in the air, and body tackles this guy. In seconds he's on top of him and has probably hit the guy 10 times, closed fists and all. Worse yet, he's not saying anything. He's not making any noise, just deep, rhythmic breathing like you do in weightlifting. Short breath in, long breath out. The cops actually kind of take their time getting him off the guy. One casually handcuffs the guy, the other handcuffs Mr. V, who is standing, untouched save for some bloody knuckles, and is just breathing steadily. Face red from exertion, eyes wide in anger and satisfaction. He still hasn't said a word. Nobody seems to notice me. The principal then calls to me, "Come in here. Get inside. Or go home. This isn't about you." I decided to walk home. As I'm heading up the road, an ambulance, sirens and all, flies past me towards the school. The next day Mr. V wasn't in school and we had a substitute. And of course, I had told some of my friends what had happened. By the end of the day people were telling me the story and it was completely wrong, of course. Mr. V pulled out a gun and shot him in the gut. And Mr. V stabbed him with that flip knife he has. The next week, without any explanation at all, Mr. V was back. First thing I noticed was written on the chalkboard he had, "If you ask, you go to detention." His face made it clear he wasn't to be tested and did not have a sense of humor about it. Nobody saw Amy again after that. I don't know what happened. About 5 or 6 years ago I was telling this to a friend and he said, "Why don't you just look her up on Facebook?" I felt stupid I hadn't thought of that. I went to my mom's, broke out my junior high yearbook, and found her last name. I'd forgotten it. When I typed it into Facebook, I found a couple dozen options since her name is pretty common. Eventually I found her on LinkedIn, of all places. She's a high school guidance counselor and has been for almost 20 years now. Her photo looks happy. She ended up going to the University of Colorado, master's program. I googled her a bit out of curiosity and found some articles she'd written for various anti-bullying and abuse awareness and management things. Well written. One of them was told like a fictional story. A girl came to school late every day. Lacking in energy. She had no personality of note and was quiet and meek. She wore loose-fitting clothing. She had few friends. It was evident to me pretty quickly she was talking about herself. In the story she wrote, the girl had been SA'd and physically abused for years by her stepdad, an abusive alcoholic. And it took a teacher with no training at all to determine what had happened and start the chain of events that ended the abuse. The point of the story was to teach other teachers what signs to watch out for. What personality traits to look for. I looked up Mr. V, as well, to see how he was doing. I worried he was dead. After all, he was in his 50s or 60s back then. I found a few articles about his baseball coaching during high school and a note saying he'd retired in 2001. Nothing after that. No obituary or anything. I like to think he's probably just sitting around watching reruns of some show he likes, drinking a beer and playing with his grandkids, who are probably about the age Amy and I were at the time. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I like to imagine. Married people, how long does love really last? When I first got married, we would be intimate everywhere. We would do things for each other. And we enjoyed each other's company. She was from Japan. I am a white American. I learned to speak Japanese and we lived in Japan for a few years and life was good. We had kids together, but over the years things grew cold between us. They say that people change and you grow apart. I don't think either of us changed. I doubt that most people change. What I suspected happened was that I would base my love on how much she loved me and vice versa. If she did something nice for me, I would do something nice for her. Or if I did something nice for her, she would do something nice for me. That all sounds fine and dandy, but I think in practice, it doesn't work. When I do something nice for her, I expect something of equal niceness in return. However, often is the case that you don't perceive what is done in return to be as valuable as what you gave him or her. So the next time you do something, you feel less inclined to do something nice. And so the love kind of fizzles. You basically stop caring because you perceive your partner as not caring. And chances are your partner feels the same way about you. Neither person has changed. They are both the same person, but the love isn't there anymore. They let it spiral into nothingness. That is what my wife and I did. After 20 years of marriage, there was nothing. I really had no desire to do anything for my wife, because she wasn't going to do anything for me. We didn't hate each other. We helped each other when needed, but that is about all. I was unhappy with the marriage. I either wanted out or I wanted it fixed. But after 20 years of marriage, I knew that she wasn't going to try and fix the marriage. I knew that she thought I would not change, so she should not have to do anything special. And if I did change, it would only be temporary and things would go back to how they were, so why even try? I knew this would be her mindset. So I had 3 options. Divorce, stay in a lifeless, intimateless marriage, or take a chance and do something about it. I thought perhaps divorce would be the better way. Start anew. She had given up on me and didn't care. But I decided to give it a try anyway. I completely revamped my approach. I decided that I would try for 1 year to fix this. I would not require her to do anything. I would just do these things on my own. If these things wooed her back, then she would be back on her own terms and not mine. So, I committed to getting into shape. I got a better diet and started exercising. I committed to do something special for her every day, regardless of whether we were getting along or not. I committed to do at least an additional 30 minutes of housework every day. I committed to pay her a sincere compliment at least once per day. I committed not to fight with her and to only have calm arguments with her. I decided to make her dinner and breakfast as often as possible. In essence, I decided to love her every day. As I thought, I got essentially no response from her day after day. I mean, she would sometimes say, "Thank you," but that was about it. After about 4 months she started to change. I kept at it. Well, she didn't really change, she was the same person, but she saw that I was trying. She saw that she was important to me. She saw that I wasn't giving up. She wanted to be loved. She started doing things for me again. We started talking a lot more and doing a lot more together. We started dating again and going on trips. It was almost like we were newlyweds again, but with less passion, but it felt great. Sometimes I would just hold her in my arms for 30 minutes. Love can be revived. It is not easy. True love takes work. Making the decision above to love her regardless was the second best decision of my life. The first, of course, was to marry her. Our marriage is not perfect, but I look forward to seeing her every day. She is an awesome woman. She is basically the same person I married. We just let our love die. We were lazy lovers. She asked me one day what got into me and I talked with her about my plan. I think it was a pretty good plan and so did she. Yes, we are still married, but much happier now. You can't base your actions on what the other is doing in return. You need to commit to love regardless of what is done in return. That is the sacrifice, and that is where real love will begin. Real love is eternal.
I'm the miracle golden child, and my sister hates me for it. I have competed with my sister since I can remember. I was a baby born after a miscarriage our mom had, so my parents were very happy and shifted their attention away from my sister and onto me. I took some joy in this by knowing that I was favored over my sister due to unfair circumstances. I did try to outdo her a lot, but I also tried to connect with her growing up because I considered her a really cool person. However, she always seemed uninterested. I would tell my parents this, which only made them chew her out for hurting my feelings. That only caused her to hate me more. When I turned 15, I completely stopped engaging with her. My parents didn't push for us to be friends either and kept their attention on me. A few years later, I started going through my character development arc and started wanting to be independent. I also started really regretting competing with my sister and taking joy in being a miracle child when I was little. By this point, I got myself into a good college and my parents offered to pay for the tuition. Since I wanted to move out of their house, they offered to pay my new rent too. When my sister heard of my parents offering to pay for me if I moved out, she was understandably mad as they had refused to pay for anything and told her she needed to learn responsibility by paying for her own things. She blew up at my parents, but mostly at me, for stealing away the attention of our parents her entire life and making her miserable. I tried to explain that I agreed that they were bad parents and that she deserved better, but she just told me to shut my mouth and that she didn't need my sympathy. My parents forced her to apologize and threatened to cut contact if she didn't. I agree that she was harsh, but I understand how frustrated she must have felt her whole life, so I don't hold it against her. Since she didn't have much of a support system other than my parents, she sent me a super long apology over text and tried to mend things. Though it was obvious she only did it just because she was forced to. During the first few months of college I ended up meeting a guy named John and we started dating shortly after. Everything just clicked and it seemed like he knew my every thought. At my 20th birthday party, I introduced him to my family and everything seemed to go well. I kept my family and John separate because my parents were always super nosy and my sister seemed extremely judgmental when I would bring company. This time around she was super friendly though. Looking back, my sister was definitely a little too touchy with him, but I chalked it up to her just wanting to overcompensate to mend our relationship further. After I graduated, John ended up proposing and I said yes as I was head over heels in love. We decided on having a wedding once we had secured good paying jobs and things seemed to be perfect between us. Flash forward to 3 weeks ago and I got the most gut-wrenching message of my life. It was from my sister telling me that she was pregnant and it was John's. In addition to that, she sent screenshots of messages and explicit images between the two. They professed their love for each other multiple times and John said that my sister was the best he'd ever had in his life, directly telling her she was better in bed than me. It had been going on for the majority of the years we'd been together. To say I sobbed my eyes out would be an insulting understatement. I asked her how she could do this to me and she replied, "Now you know how it feels to get your whole life ripped away from you. He loves me more and I'll make sure he leaves your sorry butt for me and our baby. Go cry to our parents and see if I care." And then blocked me before I could respond. The man I used to call my fiancé came home hours later from work and saw me crying. He begged to know what was wrong and tried to comfort me, but I blew up at him and kicked him out. He admitted to the affair over text and said he loved me but loved my sister too and had to be there for his child, so the engagement is off. His brother came and took all his stuff and he hasn't even given me an apology for any of this. I've been crying for basically a month straight and all I want to do is hurt the living crap out of my sister, but I know I would go to jail, especially since she's pregnant. I thought that things were finally looking up, but then she decided to betray me, and for what? You'd think an almost 30-year-old woman would seek therapy or talk to me directly about her resentment, but no, she had to sabotage my life for the sake of hers being crap. I can't even feel any sympathy for her anymore and I just want to go away forever. I've had extremely alarming thoughts, but I've just resorted to locking myself in my room all day since I work remotely, and it's calmed down in the last few days. My sister unblocks me occasionally to keep rubbing it in my face that he chose her over me, sending pictures of them together and her baby bump. I've already blocked her to make sure she leaves me alone. She's a grown woman gloating like a child. If he's willing to cheat on me for so long, I feel incredibly bad for their baby, but definitely not for her. I haven't told my parents yet and I'm unsure how to even go about. My sister used her emotional trauma to get close to my husband. My sister Lisa lost her husband Jimmy 2 years ago in a motorcycle accident. A year ago, she reached out to us and told us she was having a hard time adjusting and said that she needed help. I helped her find a good therapist and she has been getting her life back on track. My husband Rick felt bad for her and started spending a lot of time with her. For the past 6 months, they have spent more and more time together. At first I was fine with it because she was finally becoming like my sister again. She started smiling. I was so happy for her, and so was my husband. They started spending more time alone, and I got a little jealous. I told my husband I would like it if we could spend more time together and that I was feeling a little neglected. He said okay, but nothing changed. Today my sister came to my house crying because she had a dream about Jimmy. My husband and I comforted her, but I was a little annoyed because the second I let her in my house she ran into my husband's arms. We all went into the living room and sat down. My husband asked her what happened in the dream and she actually asked me to leave the room because she didn't feel comfortable telling me. I was so upset at this point I immediately left and started tearing up in the other room. I was in the other room for around 10 minutes when I heard a loud sound in the living room, so I got up and went there. I could not believe what I saw. They were having intimacy. On my couch. In our home. I ran out of the room because I was going to vomit right there and locked myself in my room. Rick walked into the room an hour later still topless and wouldn't even look at me. He mumbled something and sat on the bed. I was so angry that he wouldn't even look at me that I almost left right there. I asked him what the hell was going on with him and my sister. He sat there for a few minutes without saying anything while I was crying my eyes out until I finally yelled at him to answer me. He whispered that he loved her. At this point I lost it. I started yelling, how could he do this to me? Do these past 10 years mean nothing to him? Literally dropped to my knees and asked how could he betray me with my own sister and then tell me he loves her. He was quiet the entire time until I stopped yelling. He said that he had been regretting not experimenting with other women before we got married and that he shouldn't have married the first girl he was with. I was stunned and asked if he ever even loved me. He said yes, but that after spending time with my sister he realized she is who he wants to be with. I had no words. I didn't have any clue what to say. All my life was falling apart in front of my eyes and I was scared. I told him I might be pregnant and he said that he would think about supporting me. Then he said he was leaving me to be with my sister. He apologized to me and told me I deserve better than him and that he will do whatever he can to help me and the baby, and if I agree to divorce him he will give me everything. He just wants out of our marriage. In that moment I felt like I hated him and never wanted to see him again, so I screamed at him, fine, just get the F out, you ruined my life, I hope you are effing happy, you piece of crap. And then he had the audacity to try to hug me. I flipped out and pushed him off of me. Someone knocked on the door, then he told me that he still loved me and we would figure everything out, and left. I decided to call my parents and tell them what happened. My mom dropped a bombshell on me that my sister told her that she had feelings for my husband and that she wanted to be with him. Why she didn't tell me this I have no clue, but I feel like everyone is against me. Act like a spoiled brat? I'll take you out of my $1 million inheritance. My sister Emily is disabled, and because of that, my parents dedicated themselves 100% to her, leaving my other siblings, Max, Lisa, Chris and I to fend for ourselves. Emily has been labeled as disabled by my parents her whole life. Because of this, my parents dedicated themselves 100% to catering to her every need and want, essentially abandoning the rest of us siblings to fend for ourselves growing up. No doctors would actually validate Emily has a real disability. I remember family gossip about how Emily didn't walk until age 5 and didn't talk until age 7. But couldn't she simply have been a late bloomer as a baby and young child? She clearly caught up developmentally by adulthood. When my older brother Max left for college when I was 15, I suddenly became the default caretaker for my younger siblings on top of having to take care of all household chores. I want to make clear that Emily's supposed disability does not actually stop her from functioning like any other person. She has no mental impairments and requires no special assistance, supervision, or 24/7 care. However, my parents have spoiled Emily rotten her whole life and she is very rude, mean, entitled, and manipulative. They raised her with the mentality that her disability means she is allowed to do whatever she wants without consequences and everyone else needs to bend over backwards to accommodate her. My grandparents on my mom's side passed away 3 years ago when I was 21 and they left me their entire estate of around $6 million. They were quite wealthy. I know the reason I received the entire ends. My grandparents were very aware of how terribly my mother had treated me and my other siblings growing up while favoring Emily. As a result, they disowned my mother from their will out of anger towards her. They were also very old-fashioned and religious people. When my sister Lisa came out as bisexual at 14 and my brother Chris came out as gay at 17, this was the final straw for them. After I moved away to college, I went completely no contact with my parents and the rest of my family except for my siblings Lisa and Chris. When they each started college as well, I offered to cover all of their living expenses and tuition as long as they kept up their academics. They were struggling financially, so they gladly accepted my support. I also helped my best friend Lola start her own small business by investing some of the inheritance money. Basically, I have used the inheritance to support the people who are important to me and who have supported me. I have not spoken to or interacted with my parents in about 6 years now. I never outright blocked their numbers, but they've never once tried to call or text me this whole time. This year, my younger sister Emily started college. In less than 4 months, she managed to burn through her entire college savings fund that my parents had set up for her. I'm talking over $500,000, gone. Why? Because Emily has always been a spoiled brat and she felt designer clothes and bags were more important than paying tuition or rent. On top of that, Emily apparently is doing horribly in her classes, likely because she barely ever attends lectures or studies. At this rate, she will absolutely either be expelled or held back from advancing. But my parents had never disciplined her or held her accountable her whole life. So about 2 weeks ago, my mother suddenly called me up out of the blue. She didn't politely ask, she demanded I start covering Emily's college costs and living expenses, just as I was doing for Chris and Lisa. I bluntly told her no, I would not give Emily a dime. I reminded my mother that I had been forced to essentially act as Emily's slave for my entire childhood while my parents ignored the rest of us. I told her I was only financially supporting Lisa and Chris because they were the only siblings who ever treated me decently growing up. I ended the call by telling my mother that for 18 years, Emily had been their only focus and child. So now they and Emily had no right to demand anything from me or my siblings after neglecting us and playing favorites our whole lives. As you can imagine, when I refused to bankroll Emily's education and lifestyle, the rest of my family turned against me. I've been getting endless harassment from aunts, uncles, cousins, even some childhood friends. They accuse me of causing unnecessary drama, damaging Emily's relationship with her siblings, and intentionally leaving her without options. They keep asking why I won't just pay for Emily's school and expenses when I have so much money now and my grandparents would have wanted me to support her. I contend that if my grandparents wanted Emily to have an inheritance, they would have left one for her. But they chose to leave everything solely to me. Everyone insists family is family, so I should just help out my poor disabled little sister. I frankly don't buy into that guilt-tripping crap. Yes, it's awful that my parents were negligent and abusive to me and my other siblings growing up, but that's not Emily's fault. However, I retort that she never does anything to change her entitled behavior or correct my parents. The family keeps spouting off that Emily can't help having a disability and it's discriminatory not to provide for her education. I finally had enough and blew up saying I felt completely justified in my decision. Of course, this caused even more drama. For reference, my parents both have quite high-paying careers and had funded Emily's college savings account with around $587,000 by the time I left home for school. Meanwhile, neither I nor my other siblings got any money from our parents for college. We all worked minimum wage jobs to scrap together scholarships one by one so we could pursue higher education. I do have a detailed will in place designating exactly how I want my inheritance assets distributed if anything happens to me. I arranged for any remaining money to be split equally between Lisa, Chris, my best friend Lola, and a reputable charity organization that protects wildlife conservation. Emily doesn't deserve a single penny of it.
My ex-wife contacted me out of the blue to tell me her affair partner mistreats her. I'm 31 and my ex-wife Claire is 35. We were married 10 years ago, right when I turned 21 and graduated college. We were married for 5 years. During my whole marriage, I thought we were happy. I certainly was, anyway. I worked in the IT field and still do. We never got into fights during our marriage and our intimate life seemed to be satisfying. A couple of months before I finally caught her with her affair partner, she turned cold to me. Whereas before she had loved to initiate intimacy and loved having it with me, suddenly we tapered off. Every day turned into once a week, then for the last 2 weeks before I outed her, not at all. I caught her because she had left her phone out and it was still open to a naked selfie that she had sent to a number I didn't know. Although I was crushed, I kept my head on and took photos of her with my phone. I saw her message stream with her boyfriend, some guy from the gym that I was paying her bill for. I didn't confront her. The text told me all I needed to know. They had been screwing while I was at work, in my bed. I just kept quiet. Then the following Saturday when I knew she would be at her supposed double yoga class and that's why I'll be gone 3 hours, I loaded my stuff into my car and left. I had talked to a divorce attorney and I would be fine. I was 25 and didn't have serious money. Her father had passed away and left her like 200K, so she was rolling in dough. I had no claim on that money, nor should I have had one. We had no kids, although she had always claimed we would start having kids when she turned 30. That birthday came and went, but rather than start having kids with me, she decided to just spread her legs for someone else. Although I was the sole income earner, she was in possession of a vast amount of money, by my standards, and also had a college degree and was a school teacher for 2 years before we got married. The divorce papers were left on the kitchen table. She of course blew up my phone later with all kinds of apologies and begging and pleading, but I ignored her. A lot of her friends tried to call me and left nasty messages about how I was a coward and never loved her, otherwise how could I ghost her? I ignored all of them. The only person I called was the guy's wife, who promptly dumped him. But I guess it worked out for my ex because she and her boyfriend got married just a few months after the divorce finalized. The only time I ever saw her again was in front of the judge to end our divorce case, where I had to pay zero alimony, and it was a clean break. She never looked at me once but kept her head down. She brought her boyfriend from the gym and he was flexing, trying to look hard like he was going to fight me. I just shook my head at him and thought he gets what he pays for. I've been on dates since then and have had intimacy a few times since then, but have never been in a long-term relationship since. This was my own choice. In a lot of ways I'm not over my relationship with her. I don't love her anymore, but I'm turned off from loving anyone now. I reconnected with some of my friends I had neglected during my marriage since my wife disapproved of me being friends with anyone. Facebook used to be an app I used, but pretty much anyone I care about I already see and converse with face to face or on the phone, so I never use it anymore. Apparently Claire had spun a narrative that I was mentally abusive, and that's why she had no choice but to leave me for an affair partner. My parents didn't buy it, and my close associates didn't buy it, either. But she tried selling the crap to my boss to get me fired, I guess as revenge against me ruining her boyfriend's marriage. Ironic, that she caped for his marriage, when it was his new bachelorhood that helped make a relatively honest woman out of her. I just showed my boss the texts where my ex begged for mercy and forgiveness and admitted she was having an affair and that I was a good husband, etc. He just told me he was sorry, and gave me 2 weeks paid off to rest. My girlfriend is mad at me for asking her to get tested for STDs. For context, I just finished my freshman year of college. As an athlete, I befriended many older guys who became my brothers. I'm in a large friend group with 8 guys, and 5 of them are a year older. Earlier this year, I met a girl, and she's a year older than me. She is beautiful and extremely kind. I got to know her, and we quickly became friends. But our relationship became flirtatious quickly, and I went on several dates with her. I liked her and asked her to be my girlfriend. She said yes. Since we're on summer break, one of my friends invited our entire friend group to his parents' beach house for a week. We were just catching up, but I got distracted because I was texting my GF. She made a joke, and I smiled a little. One of my friends asked, "Who had me smiling like that?" I laughed and just shrugged. They kept pushing for an answer. I told them I was seeing a girl, and we'd been together for a month. I'm a private person, so unlike many friends, I keep my dating life to myself. They asked what she looked like, and I showed them her Instagram. It was quiet for a few seconds as soon as they saw her. Still, a couple of them started laughing obnoxiously while others tried to contain themselves. I was confused and ready to defend her looks because I thought they laughed at her physical appearance. I was annoyed and asked what was funny, but they kept laughing. When they calmed down, one of my guy friends kept calling her a whore, and I got mad at him. He and several other guys started telling me stories about how she sleeps with any guy who shows her the slightest attention. They showed me videos of her with different guys. In some videos, she was with 2 to 4 guys at a time. I know it's her because some videos had her face in it. But even in the ones where her face wasn't shown, it was apparent it was her because she had distinctive tattoos on her back and thighs. There is a Snapchat group chat where athletes and other guys send each other videos of themselves with different girls. It's like a game to them. And apparently, she's in that group chat a lot. I was shown more than 10 other videos of her. They had more, but I had enough at that point. They told me that she was notorious during her freshman year for sleeping with athletes. And they joked that she'd start with one athletic team then move on to the next. In their own words, she's still accessible, but calmed down a bit this year. I was a little shocked at all of this. They kept making jokes about her, and I was basically the laughingstock of my friend group. The guys were ruthless with the marks. They started sending me memes where they photoshopped screenshots of her face from one of her tapes. I got furious at them, so they stopped for now. Yesterday, one of my close friends advised me to get tested. I told him I hadn't slept with her yet, and he told me to ensure she was clean if I wanted to continue seeing her. He told me that he would support me no matter what, but I shouldn't expect the other guys to take her thoughtfully for a while. I FaceTimed her last night while I was alone. We talked for a while, but I mentioned wanting both of us to get tested for STDs before sleeping with each other. She asked why, and I told her for safety reasons. I asked her to go ahead and get tested since she's home. And I'll get tested as soon as I return from the beach. She said this came out of nowhere. She said she felt uncomfortable with that and asked if I cheated. I told her I didn't cheat, but I'd like to have us both tested before we sleep together for safety. She got furious. She said she was clean and asked me to trust her. I told her I did trust her, but I wanted both of us to be medically checked out. She said I was being a lousy BF for not trusting her and refused to get tested. I tried to explain that we'd both get tested, and I wasn't accusing her of anything, but she just hung up. I was careful with my wording because I didn't want it to appear like I was accusing her of anything. But she kept talking about lacking trust, but it's not about that. I like her, but I need to know we're both. Can't keep it in your pants? Have fun trying to live a normal life. In my country, high school starts at the age of 15 and lasts 3 years. I was a year early, so I was 14. During the first weeks of school, a guy in my class, for the sake of this story I'll call him Connor, approached me and we started getting along to the point we quickly started dating. Little did I know Connor would become my worst nightmare for the next 3 years. He was 17 when we met, and just like a lot of guys this age, he was obsessed with doing it. He pressured me into having my first time with him, and he broke up with me right after I eventually gave in. After that, none of our next intercourses were consented. He was very manipulative and gaslit me into believing I wanted everything that was happening to me. It took me a while to understand what he was actually doing. In fact, I only got it after hooking up with another person at the age of 17. Before it finally hit me, he had his way with me more than 50 times. During our second year of high school, he made the mistake of forcing himself violently on my best friend. She ended up getting a baby garbage because of him, and I started plotting my revenge. Originally it was supposed to avenge her, but it ended up working for me as well. I noticed that not only he would only approach the first years even if he was 20 when I graduated, but he would also target the youngest girls among them too. He was repeating me how much more attractive I was at 14 than 17. So, knowing that it was pointless to tell the police because in my country only 0.4% of all complaints of rape where victims are less than 15 end up in a sentence, I ruined his reputation. I told every single one of his acquaintances that he was a rapist, and to protect my best friend I told everyone I was the one he had violated, which wasn't really a lie. The rumor spread like wildfire, and after a few days even the teachers were looking at him with disgust. He was isolated, and the only reason why he wasn't bullied was because he is 6 feet 3 inches / 190 cm tall. I could have stopped there, but I didn't. When we were third years, I knew exactly which universities he applied for. By snooping in Connor's bag I found his application numbers, so using those I contacted every single university he applied for and explained the situation, providing screenshots of his conversation with my best friend where he was threatening her with a defamation case if she attempted to press charges against him. She had sent them to me to rant about him and I had kept them all this time. All of them thanked me and he ended up not being able to get in any university. He had to repeat his third year because of that, in an establishment where everyone knew what he had done and all the first years would know that they had to avoid him at all costs. The next year, since I wasn't there to foil his applications, Connor was accepted in a university that I hadn't contacted the previous year. Unfortunately for him, I ended up learning which university he was going in and repeated the same process. There were former students of our high school in the university he was going to, who spoke up to the uni's mental health center about the inappropriate behavior he had with them and told them what kind of rumors there were against him. Since I had provided proof that the rumors were true, Connor was permanently expelled for the safety of the female students attending the university. So now he doesn't have a degree and nowhere else to go study, with no social life. His situation couldn't get worse, could it? Well, yes. I made it worse. Connor tried to move to another region where no one would know him, and pass a diploma to work with kids. However, Connor is a phone addict, and couldn't help but share on his social medias that he had passed his diploma and started working as an educator for troubled kids and preteens. Little did he know, I had created an account pretending to be one of his only remaining high school acquaintances who I knew was chronically offline. With a bit of searching I ended up finding his workplace, and started the same process all over again. I also added a message he had left on my voicemail where he was panting while telling me how hot I was at the age of 14 and how he would have loved to go back in time just to F me again. Needless to say they got rid of him really quick, fearing for the safety of the kids. I was planning on keeping reporting him to all the places he was planning to work to, but his previous workplace took care of that for me. I don't know how, but according to Connor's social media they managed to get him blacklisted on a national level, technically invalidating his diploma. Due to this he couldn't pay his rent anymore and ended up being homeless for a while before his mother accepted to take him back in. I'm friends with his older sister who knows everything about it, and told the rest of the family what happened. From what she's told me, everyone cut off ties with both Connor and his mother, including her. I'm still occasionally stalking his social media to see if he's trying to get back on his feet. The last time I checked was today, right before writing all of this. So roping two people ended up isolating him both socially and from his family. As long as I'm alive he has no chance of ever getting a girlfriend. He lives in the region where he spent his high school years so no one would hire him even as a cleaner, and he even spent some nights in the street. Honestly at this point it's impressive that no one tried to harm him physically, make him go through what he made me and my best friend go through, or even end his life. Go to hell, Connor. And trust me when I tell you that you'll have to wait for me to die before even thinking about starting to have a normal life.
I used to hate my husband, but now I think I'm in love with him. I know the title is exactly how it sounds. I, 27 female, and my husband, 27 male, have been married since we were 18 years old. At the age of 9, my family promised me away to our family friend's son. I have dreaded my birthdays ever since, 1 year closer to marriage and 1 year closer from being stripped of my freedom. While I was counting down the years, I met a guy. He made me happy, made me forget about ever having to worry at all. Eventually I turned 18, and I met my husband for the first time. I hated him. Looking at him made my blood boil, because I had already loved someone. We got married 2 days after meeting. After the wedding we didn't do anything. I remember sitting down on the honeymoon bed. He walked in and said, "I do not love you nor do you love me, so let's have an open relationship." I didn't argue, and told him okay. I was happy because that means I could see the guy I was so desperately in love with. But we had rules. We could never do the deed in the bedroom, we must always sleep in the same bed, no talking bad about each other to our partners and more basic things. So every year after that we put on the same act, a loving husband and wife at family gatherings after we went off with our partners. Me and my boyfriend were doing very good, while my husband never dated, only one night stands. A couple of years passed, and I thought everything was going okay until I found out my boyfriend had been cheating on me with a friend from high school. Ironic, I know.
My best friend removed me from her wedding party because I lost weight and she felt insecure. My best friend is getting married soon. When she first announced it, I was in the process of trying to lose weight. I was somewhere around 93 kilograms when she last saw me, and now I'm 61. She was unaware I had lost so much weight due to minimal contact, but she asked me to be her bridesmaid and I accepted. When she saw me, she didn't seem too happy. Something was off as she barely even hugged me. She didn't say anything then, so I just assumed I was reading into it. When we were getting lunch at a restaurant, she noticed I only got brown rice and a salad, and she commented on how I'd changed so much. I only laughed and told her that I was on a diet until I lost some more weight. This led to a rant from her side about how now she feels like the fat one of the two. We have been friends since high school, and she's had this thing where she'd treat me like I was a guy. I am 5 feet 7 inches and she's barely 5 feet tall. Because of this height difference, I've always looked heavy next to her, and she took pleasure in that. She used to wear my clothes and comment on how my t-shirt is a one piece for her. How my hands are so much bigger than hers. And some days, how I look like her mother because of how tall and fat I was. This always made me feel less feminine somehow, and kind of ugly. However, now that I'd lost weight, I didn't look fat anymore and she couldn't do any of those cutesy things and that really hurt her. I attempted to change the topic but she kept circling back to that, and then asked me if I'd lost weight deliberately for her wedding. I told her that I'd been trying to lose weight for a while before that, but her wedding was a good motivator for me. I wanted to look good at my best friend's wedding, and feel more confident in a bridesmaid dress. Then, she flat out accused me of trying to steal her thunder. She said that whenever I'd said I was going to try to lose weight, I'd relapse back to old habits pretty quick, so she didn't think I was serious. She told me that I was trying to make her look like the ugly best friend and trying to steal her spotlight on the most important day of her life. She then proceeded to tell me at one point that she was still prettier and daintier than me and no matter how thin I got, she'd always be thinner. She added that because of this betrayal she no longer felt comfortable having me as a bridesmaid, and I could attend as a guest instead. That strung a nerve, and I promptly left the restaurant, and texted her that I was not interested in attending her wedding. Been getting a lot of messages on her part and her mom about how I'm stressing her out and attempting to guilt trip her. Tired and done with her poop already. Some things she's done to me over the years. 1. Sending me memes about how every tiny girl needs a huge girl to protect her. 2. Post pictures of us where she looked great, but I didn't even though we had so many where we both looked good. 3. Whine about how she's trying to put on weight right after I tried talking about how I was trying to lose some weight. 4. Fat jokes. 5. Flirting with guys I liked. She'd talk trash about them right until I thought they were cute, then she would flirt with them. 6. I'm not like other girls. 7. Call herself fat when I comment on my own body. 8. She used to comment really mean things on my posts. I posted a picture of me in a pretty dress at an event, and she said I bet that dress would look better on me. All her comments were meant to be jokes and she never stopped saying those things, even when I said they weren't funny and wanted her to stop. 9. Coming to my house for a sleepover, and then ditching me in the middle of the night to go hang out with someone else, only to come back to sleep. 10. All her girlfriends are jealous of her. She used to come to me and rant about how literally every girl in her life is jealous of her because boys give her more attention. Made me wonder if she spoke about me the same way to others.
My mother-in-law chopped off my hair. When I was younger, I had to handle a bunch of terrible situations. My way to escape from all that was through my hair. I know it might sound funny, but that's how it was. Whenever things got tough, I turned to my hair and used it to show how I was feeling. I cut it, color it, style it in crazy ways, whatever helped me feel better. Back in 2011, I decided to give myself a purple mohawk like they had in the 80s. That meant I had to shave off a big part of my hair. That was the last time I felt like I wasn't in control of my own life. After that, I just let my hair grow without doing much to it except taking care of it. This year, after having my third child, my hair grew all the way down to my thighs. To me, my long and beautiful hair shows how much I've improved my mental health and how happy I am. It means a lot to me. Now, let's fast forward. With 3 young kids, I mostly keep my long hair in a ponytail, braid, or bun. Otherwise, my littles can't resist pulling on it. Strangely, my husband's stepmom seems to have a real problem with my long hair. Every time I see her, she mentions how she thinks my hair is a waste on me. She even makes snarky comments about how messy it looks. She's a bother, but I usually ignore her because she's just looking for attention, and I don't want to give her that. But something changed yesterday. I was sitting on my father-in-law's couch, feeding my youngest baby, and having a nice chat with my husband and father-in-law about what we were watching on TV. All of a sudden, I felt a tug on my hair, and before I could react, I heard the sound of scissors. There was my mother-in-law and my 4-year-old standing behind the couch, both laughing while she held a big chunk of what used to be my bun. We all turned and stared at her like she was a character from a cartoon. I was heartbroken and trying hard not to cry in front of my kids. My husband started yelling and asking her if she had lost her mind. My 4-year-old began to cry, which made my mother-in-law tear up too. She said it was just a joke and that my hair would grow back. The whole scene turned into chaos, with my husband arguing on my behalf, my kids and I crying, my mother-in-law sniffling, and my father-in-law trying to calm everyone down. In the end, we left, and my husband even told his dad that maybe he should divorce his wife since being married to someone acting like an immature 8-year-old might be against the law. I might have chuckled at that if I wasn't so upset. My husband drove us around to find a hairstylist who could take us in without an appointment. I called my sister-in-law to come and be with me. Thankfully, she came to her friend's salon even though she was off that day. When I saw the state of my hair, it was awful. Big chunks were missing, and the length was all uneven. It felt like I had lost a part of myself. Thankfully, the stylist was really skilled and managed to make my hair look nice, just above my shoulders. It's a good look, but I'm still sad when I see it. I don't know how long it'll take for me to get over this. My mother-in-law sent me a few half-hearted apology texts, saying sorry but also telling me not to be so sensitive since hair grows back. My husband wanted to open up our marriage, so I started dating his boss. Now he wants to close it. The last time I posted, my husband had just found out about his boss and me dating. After my husband saw his boss kiss me at his place of work, he put the pieces together, and it made him upset enough to ask me to close our marriage back up. I was so torn. I felt bad to see my husband hurting, but he had left me in a place of hurt for so long after asking for this arrangement in the first place. I admit I was tempted by the things my husband said in the conversation where he asked to close our relationship again. He just kept saying over and over that he would be better and committed. He kept saying I was the only thing he needed in the world, and he had been blind to that before. These were all words I had been waiting and wishing to hear for so long. Yet hearing them now, I felt nothing but pity for my husband. I still loved him. We had been together for almost 10 years, and what I felt for him was incredibly strong after being life partners for this long. But I still love myself more, and as I said in my initial post, I had strong feelings for my boyfriend already. I told my husband that I loved him, but I had a say in this relationship too, and I didn't want to close our marriage back up. He was a mess at this answer. At one point, he got on his knees to beg me to reconsider, but I stood firm. I wouldn't hurt myself again to prioritize my husband's feelings. For the next couple of months, my husband went through a disorienting array of behaviors towards me. For the first few months, he was incredibly loving and attentive to me. He was cooking for us every night and insisted we have dinner almost every night together at home. He bought me flowers every day for 2 months and tried to initiate intimacy literally every single night. These are all things he's never really done for me before, so I was surprised and happy with all these changes. Although it did seem sort of performative of him to only start being a good husband now in an effort to win me back for himself. If he did love me, where had this treatment been before? He still seemed sad on the nights when I left him to go see my boyfriend, and I noticed he was seeing his own girlfriend less and less. Anyway, I was feeling conflicted, but my boyfriend and I's relationship continued to blossom as we learned more about each other and kept spending time together. About a month ago, my boyfriend had taken me on a very luxurious and intimate date. He reserved an entire restaurant for us and then arranged a helicopter ride for us after dinner. It was such a beautiful and romantic night and we had an amazing time together. There was no special occasion, and when I asked him why he had done all this, he said he just wanted to show me how much he appreciated his time with me, and I deserved to be treated like the catch that I am. Before I left my boyfriend's house the next morning, I broke down crying while venting to him, saying that I wished my situation could be less complicated and that I was sorry if he felt like our relationship was unconventional because I was still a married woman. My boyfriend just listened and held me as I cried. He held me and stroked my hair and said he didn't care about my husband, he was just grateful for any time he got to spend with me, and that I was a blessing in his life, and he was just happy he got to meet a wonderful woman like me. Then he got up to make me my favorite flavor of tea. He had found out my favorite brand of tea a month ago and kept it stocked at his apartment since then. When he handed me the tea, he looked into my eyes and asked if it could be his turn to be honest with me. That's when he told me that he had never met anyone like me and that he had fallen in love with me. As soon as he said that, something just felt so right in my body and mind. I said it back to him, and we cried happy tears together. We didn't worry about anything else at that moment, we just enjoyed the vulnerability. Nothing could ruin that pure moment for us. Or so I thought, but I still don't regret telling him the truth about my feelings. I do love him, but I wish it hadn't. Tea resulted in the mess that it did. After my boyfriend returned to work after this date, I guess he had started telling some of his coworkers about how well his relationship had been going, and it must have gotten back to my husband.
Cheat on me? I'll turn all your boyfriends gay and have a threesome. A few years ago my ex-girlfriend cheated on me with another guy. She then had the audacity to tell me that if I was a grown-up that I could deal with it and that she hopes we can still be friends, but she has lost any feelings for me and is fully in love with this new guy now. If she hadn't said that I probably wouldn't have made this plan. But now I had to teach her a valuable lesson. I was in a depressed state for a long time and couldn't bring myself to delete her number. She started to send me pictures of her and her new boyfriend with laughing emojis, and it was clear that she didn't even care about how much she had hurt me. Then one day while I went through Tinder I found someone who was quite familiar. Her new boyfriend. Of course I wouldn't tell her that her new boyfriend was on Tinder. In fact I matched with him. I am bisexual, But I was quite surprised because I thought he was straight, and we started a conversation. He didn't know who I was. She never told him she was in a relationship while she was flirting with him. This was perfect. We had longer conversations and he told me more and more about him. Over the weeks we learned more and more about each other and now I had a plan. I suggested that we could meet each other at a bar. He agreed. When we met we had a great time. And one date became many dates. It took me a few months but I got him to the point where he developed feelings for me and I was his affair. At the same time, I got in contact with my girlfriend's former ex-boyfriend as well. He broke up with her because he came out as gay. I was in contact with both guys. The ex-boyfriend and I got along very well. In fact, I made him a close friend of mine. In our conversations with my new boyfriend we talked about sexual desires and he told me that he always wanted to have a threesome, so I suggested one with the gay ex-boyfriend. I knew that he was his type because we kinda look alike and he had feelings for me. I asked the gay ex-boyfriend if he wanted to become the third one and to my surprise he said yes. I'm honestly still surprised how all of that worked out without her noticing, but it did, and then the day came where I decided to go nuclear. The two guys came to my apartment. I led them to the bedroom and they started talking to each other. While they talked I took a selfie from a safe distance. Close enough that she could see their faces but far enough that they wouldn't notice. Then the action started. I won't go into any detail but damn I enjoyed it more than anything in the world. A few days after this I told him that now that I granted him the wish of a threesome I wanted something in return. I told him that I don't want to be his affair any longer and told him that he should either break up with his girlfriend or I would break up with him. I knew it was hardcore manipulative but I had a plan and I had full control over him. He actually broke up with her and threw her out. I even got him to move out of his apartment to move in with me, meaning that she lost both her home and her boyfriend, but I wasn't done yet. After that, she texted me with crying emojis that her boyfriend dumped her and that she regrets leaving me. I then said, "Your boyfriend? Are you talking about this guy?" And I sent her the selfie I took. She called and texted me several times but I ignored her. There were only 3 things left that I still had to do. The first was that I told her mother, who hates infidelity more than anything because her father cheated on her mother with another woman. Her mother was angry but thanked me for telling her. From what I've heard is that her mother cut ties with her. The second thing I did was dumping my new boyfriend because unfortunately for him he was a cheater too and I hate infidelity as well. The last thing I did was start going out with the gay ex-boyfriend, and after a few dates we got together and we are still a couple. My wife told me to choose between her or my mom, so I chose divorce. My mom and dad were both orphans. My dad died 2 weeks before I was born, and my mom didn't really have a support system, so we were just the two of us. I never lacked anything because my mother worked all her life to give me the life I have today and didn't even have time for herself to start a new life again. She did all the little jobs possible so that we didn't miss anything. She deprived herself of food to give me food. I had very good clothes while she had none. I saw her make sacrifices again and always with a smile. Frankly, I always thought she was an angel dressed in a human body. The only time she yelled at me was when I was 16 when I saw her getting sick and working at the same time. I wanted to help her by finding a job, but she was angry and told me it was not my job to take care of her and it was up to her to take care of me. She wanted me to get really good grades to get into the best universities because it was the only way I can protect myself when she can't anymore. Even at university, she didn't want me to work. I had to be focused on my studies, but she wanted me to volunteer so that I could be an adult who could do something with his hands. I met my wife there while both of us were volunteering. My wife is a good person, but she was never close to her parents or her siblings. Yet she adored my mother since she met her. There were times when I thought she loved my mother more than she loved me and we laughed about it. Deep down, I think she was looking for the bond between mother and daughter that she did not have from her mother. When I finished my studies, I found a job, and we moved in together, but she wasn't comfortable that I call my mom every day. Mind you, those were 10 to 15-minute calls, but eventually she stopped bringing it up. 2 years later I bought a house for my mother, because we never had a house in our name. We lived from apartment to apartment. So for all the sacrifices she made it was for me the least of it and it was non-negotiable. That's where the problem started with my wife. She wanted me to think about us first. I told her my dream had always been to buy my mom a house since I was little and that's what I had to do. But she complained about it to my mom. My mom didn't even know I bought a house for her as it was supposed to be a surprise for her birthday. She was uncomfortable receiving the house because of my wife and told me that wasn't necessary and that we could use it for us when we get married. I was furious. I told my mother that the house was for her and that she could do with it whatever she wanted, but it was time for her to think about herself first. Our relationship survived that. We got married and then we had our own house. Our life was going well until 2 months ago when my mother fell ill. I wanted her to come and live with us so that I could take care of her, but my wife didn't want to. I then decided to rent an apartment with my own money right next to our house so that I could be close to her and go there to take care of her. But even that idea didn't sit well with my wife. Me and my wife don't have children yet. We both work. I usually come home at 6 p.m., but since my mother is sick, I go to see her and come home at 8 p.m. On weekends I see her for 1 or 2 hours and the rest of the time I spend with my wife. We go on dates. I always accompany her in her hobbies even though she never went to mine. 2 days ago she told me that she thought about it and she thinks I prioritize my mother too much. She told me that I had to choose between my mother and the life I want to build with her. The truth is that I never made her feel that way. We both work but I'm the one who cooks, and I pay a person to do the housework. I make sure I do the dishes she likes. She didn't even know what I like to eat because I never complain. I run her baths, give her massages, flowers, I write her poems. That I hide somewhere in the house for her to find out. We go on a trip 1 weekend a month. I earn much more money than her. I told her to keep her money for herself and I take care of all the bills, even hers. I always make sure to listen to her and consider her opinion. And I think I am easygoing because I can change my mind to accommodate hers, but I realize that she tries to completely dominate me, and the only subject where I don't give her a choice is my relationship with my mother. So there I'm going to have a talk with her and put some very clear boundaries. If she doesn't want to, well, we're going to divorce. Stopped my husband from taking his own life, and he thinks I never knew his plans. My husband and I are 28. We have 3 kids. He's the only boyfriend I've ever had. He's been with me since high school. He's always had low self-esteem. I do too, but not like he does. One day, we got new phones. Maybe 7 years ago, I found out I can read his texts. He can see mine too, but he didn't know about it. This happened for like another 2 years. For his birthday and Christmas, I'd snoop around his texts and see if there's something he was talking about that he wanted. One day, around November, I was being nosy to see what I can get him for Christmas. I was pregnant with our second child at the time. I saw he was texting someone something suspicious, saying, "Where can we meet?" and I thought this was with another girl. I read them more, and I found out he was buying drugs. My husband and I don't even drink, so I freaked out. I wondered about how long this was going in for, if I even knew my own husband anymore. Turns out he was buying something that doesn't get you high but kills you. I looked around everywhere. I tore our room apart and didn't find anything. I went through the search history and all his emails on his phone when he was asleep that night, and found out he was making arrangements for a specific date 3 months after I was due. He was looking at life insurance, which we have had since I'm a stay-at-home mom. He was even looking up how much tea costs to be cremated. Once he got home, the first thing I did was sneak his phone and text that guy and say, "I'm no longer interested. If someone else tells you otherwise, it means someone else has my phone," and delete that guy's number. I didn't want him to know I was snooping, but the thought of my husband not being around tore me. I remember being sick to my stomach and bawling in our room, just thinking of the idea of not having him around. I love him more than life in itself. I would die for him and not even have to think about it. My husband is my entire world. That day on, I made sure he knew that, even if it meant embarrassing myself. I started bringing him flowers at work almost every day. When he would come through the door, I would screech with excitement and give him a hug and a smooch and tell him I missed him so much, and I couldn't stop thinking about him all day. When I was out with him, how beautiful and handsome he was. When he was around my friends, I'd say, "Look at my husband. He's so beautiful." I'd call him at work and ask how much longer until he's home. I got him to start going to therapy too. One night I woke him up because I was freaking out and couldn't sleep. I told him I had a nightmare. I said I had a dream he passed away. He said, "Why is that a bad thing?" And I told him he's my entire world, and other than I live for. He said, "But things would be better if I was out of your hair." And I said, "No, they wouldn't. If you left me, it would literally ruin my life." He said, "Not if you're financially well off. You'll be much better off." And I said, "I could have all the money in the world. It would mean nothing if I didn't have you. I'd much rather be homeless but still have you as my husband than be filthy rich, and you be gone." And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, 100%. I'd sleep under a bridge if it meant I still got to sleep next to you. He said, "I didn't know you felt that way." And I said, "I really do." I asked if I could go with him to therapy. He said yes. I told his therapist I think he has depression, and he admitted he might. He got a prescription, and it seemed to help him a whole lot. Even though it's been 5 years, I still do all those nice things for him. Like call him handsome and bring him flowers. I don't ever want him to second guess for a second that he's my sunshine. Who's the dumbest person you've ever met? It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.99999% of the time they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what the theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability, you know? I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we use to try and ballpark their ability. I thought that's fine. I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade, and now he was in 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when and where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got the crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me. His English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at 711 after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice, Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied that it was ringing. He didn't say that it wasn't his, not that he did it. No. He denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a mother-effing bitch during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tased himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin says the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said you should get out of those wet clothes. The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download adult film onto a computer in the library. At the circulation desk, while he was logged on to the librarian's account, Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom, by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair, constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing his name on it wherever there was room, not even on the name line. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party, it's high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was only allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the duck did they even get airline tickets? And forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mom, who told me that first thing when I saw her at the biweekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. My wife got a disrespectful tattoo, so I divorced her. My ex-wife, Anne, and I are in our mid-30s. We were married 3 years, together 5 years total. After our engagement party, Anne told me she wants to get matching tattoos. I told her I have nothing against tattoos, I just don't want one. After the wedding, she again asked to get matching tattoos. I said no again. I told her she can get a tattoo if she wanted, but I'm not interested. She said it's something she wants to do as a couple and won't get one unless I get a matching one. I still refused, but she brings it up again every 6 months or so and is more insistent every time. Recently she was promoted and transferred at her job. One of her new coworkers has several tattoos and she has spoken to him about it. He suggested I wasn't a man if I was scared to get a tattoo. She asked me if I was scared to get a tattoo. I said, I'm not scared, there's just no reason to do it, then added, I understand why your friend at work would insult my manhood. He's trying to get into your pants. But why would you throw his words in my face? Her response was, if the shoe fits. Then she got up, went to the bedroom, and slammed the door. That was when I began to suspect that she was sleeping with her coworker. I mean, why else would she start acting this cruelly out of nowhere? She didn't talk to me for 2 days. A few days later she told me she was going shopping. That evening she came home and showed me her new tattoo, 2 Chinese symbols on her forearm. She said they mean strength and independence. My ex-wife is white and does not speak Chinese, by the way. When I looked closer I saw there were English letters, JW, beneath the Chinese ones. I asked her about the initials. She was silent a while, took a deep breath, and said they were her co-worker's initials. He had taken her to his tattoo artist. He had suggested those particular Chinese characters. He stayed with her and lent support while she got inked. She wanted to honor that support in their friendship, so she had his initials tattooed beneath the symbols. Controlling my anger, I told her that having another man's initials tattooed on her body was disrespectful to me and that she should have them removed. She said I was trying to control her, that I had said she could have a tattoo, and I refused to share the tattoo experience with her, so she had chosen to share that experience with a friend who wasn't scared of a little needle. I sat there at a loss wondering how could she not see that it's disrespectful? We barely spoke the next few days, and when we did the tattoo was always the subject. She said I should get over it and there's nothing wrong with having JW's initials tattooed on her arm. Finally, after weeks of fighting, I straight up asked if she was sleeping with JW. She hesitated, then said yes and actually sneered at me. At least he's a real man, she said. The details of our breakup and divorce aren't important other than to say that it was not contested. The few times we spoke during the process we were civil to each other. The day the divorce was finalized I called and told her I finally had a good reason, so I got a tattoo. I said my tattoo also symbolizes strength and independence. My tattoo is the date our divorce was final. She was silent for a while, and when she began to cry I hung up. My ex dumped me to get her kitty pounded by sweaty frat guys. Now she's begging for me back. We were high school sweethearts and each other's first everything. I thought she was going to be the one. However, she had other plans. After a week of partying in college, she came home and broke up with me. Her reasoning? That while she loves me with all of her heart and I am the one she wants to be with forever and marry while she is in college, she does not want to be tied down and needed to be able to have her fun. She even went on to tell me that she wanted to make sure I knew she would always practice safe intimacy for our future together. I begged her not to do this and that under no circumstance would I ever consider this okay. She said that over time I'd understand and to stop being a weak little B-word. She even made me promise to use protection as well. 2 weeks later, she called me and asked me if I stopped acting like an immature brat. Before I even said anything, she started telling me all about how she got pounded by 4 guys, 2 of which she did at the same time. I broke down when she told me this. She said she did not want to hurt me, so she wouldn't be telling me any more about what she does. I told her that I had no desire to talk with her anymore, period. That I was willing to work on things before she slept with other people, but that was the end of it for me. She said once again that I was being immature and that she would just wait for me to contact her when I was grown up enough to understand that there is a difference between intimacy and love. That was the last time I spoke to her until about 1 month ago, when she moved back home and showed up at my house one night acting like we had been together and not apart for 3 years. She did not expect nor appreciate my reaction to her showing up. I opened the door and there she was with a big smile on her face. She immediately asked to come in and I said I would come outside, which obviously caught her off guard. I asked what she wanted and she said, and I quote, "Well, that's a hell of a way to greet someone you love." To which I told her that she was delusional and that whatever love I had for her died the day she told me she had already started having intimacy with other men. She honestly had a very confused look on her face and then said, and I quote again, "Are you still uptight about all of that?" and then said, "I would have thought by now you would have grown up about that." I told her that not only was I not over it, that I would never be over it other than to be over us. At which time she proceeds to say to me, "You mean to tell me you are throwing away everything that we are together because of some stupid physical issue? I know we love each other and are meant to be together, so how do we fix this?" I was just dumbstruck. How can one person be this stupid? I asked her what I was throwing away. We have not spoken in almost 3 years other than via text, and even then it was her texting me and not me replying. She left very disappointed and that should have been the end of it. But here is the kick in the butt. I have now been inundated by friends, her family, and hell, even some of my family wanting to know why I was throwing away someone so special. I ended up telling my family members the truth, and after they heard about it they quickly recanted and told me to tell her to F off. But to her family, I just said she dumped me years ago and we hadn't been together for almost 3 years. This came as a shock to them, as she had been telling them all along that we were still a couple, and even when she was home on breaks would tell them we planned on marrying. At first, they didn't believe me that we hadn't seen each other in years, and I'm still not sure they do. I told my parents and they suggested that I should just go along with what she says because she's my one true love. My friends are even saying the same. They know the truth and yet they think I'm being weird about all of this. They said when you are young you are supposed to play the field, but if you love someone you know that in the end, you will be together. Am I wrong?
My husband's girl best friend is pregnant and she says it's his. So I met my husband, 25 male, while I was 22, and we hit it off instantly. He was the man of my dreams. He took me on date nights and made sure I was loved and gave me big gifts every so often, telling me I was the only one for him. I believe this since we have been together for 4 years now, and I've never had any issues, until he introduced his best friend, who we will call Laura for privacy reasons. I remember we had an argument because he didn't tell me about her for our whole relationship, and he had been sneaking to see her and hang out with her at parties when I was sleeping, believing that he was working overtime. I was hurt by this and my first thought immediately went to infidelity, but I found all of their texts to be platonic after he willingly told me to look. I thought she was nice at first, since when I first met her she spoke to me politely and said how lucky I was for about a week, until there was a get-together and my husband invited me along, because it was her mother's anniversary and her family loved my husband, as they had known each other since they were kids. I was okay with this and quite excited, since I wanted to make more female friends and have girls' nights out to relieve my work stress, since my job is difficult and I make 6 figures. I should also mention my husband works in an office job that doesn't pay a lot, so I handle all of the house bills and chores while he is trying to get another job. I walked into the house with my husband and she ran to him happy and immediately wrapped her whole body around his arm and dragged him off to the garden. He didn't even come to get me or anything after being dragged away, so I went to the kitchen to ask for a drink, where I was greeted by Laura's mother. She is a lovely person. We generally had a nice talk about our own lives and she made sure I felt welcome. The whole gathering was mainly nothing special till it got to the dinner. I sat down next to my husband and Laura walked up to me and asked me to move. I asked why, since the only other spot available was next to her uncle and mother, and since it was about her mother, wouldn't she want to sit next to her? Laura replied to the question with, "Because I want to sit next to him." I turned to my husband, who just nodded and told me to move as well, saying that I was being childish and making a scene. At this point I generally felt my blood boiling. I stood up and told my husband that I felt uncomfortable and that I needed to go to the bathroom, and asked where it was. Laura told me, and I left the table doing breathing exercises trying to calm down. I ended up messaging my brother from the bathroom and he said I was being jealous and that I was overreacting, so I agreed and went back to the table to sit next to Laura's mother. The whole time they were laughing and it seemed that everything he said was funny to her, and she kept rubbing his back, touching his arms, and saying how strong he had gotten, and she would look at me smugly. The breaking point to all of this was when I put a bit of meat onto my plate and she said, "Are you really going to eat all of that?" And I froze in embarrassment while my husband and her laughed. Her mother stood up for me, saying that was inappropriate and to treat guests with respect, but she ignored it. Laura is very pretty and slim and works out, so coming from her it hurt a lot. I stood up from my chair and walked out the front door and called my dad. I told him to pick me up and that I'll explain why in the car. When I got in the car I broke down and told him everything. He said I was most likely overreacting, but the situation was very odd, and that I'm welcome to stay with him for the time being. I thanked him and went back to our house. While I was getting comfortable my phone flooded up with messages from my husband and Laura. I read the messages, and to my horror, my husband was saying I ruined the whole dinner and that he was going to stay there for the night. I then read what Laura said, saying I had ruined her night because of my pick me behavior. After doing research on that word, it's only filled me up with more anger. My husband came home around 5 p.m. from Laura's, and I immediately said, leaving me and staying at another woman's house was disgusting, and he started shouting that I'm overreacting again and that I need to go to counseling for my jealousy issues. For about a month everything was going okay again, apart from that my husband getting more distant and cold, and I could feel that our argument wedged a gap in our marriage, until I got a message from Laura this morning with a positive pregnancy result, and a threat saying we should get divorced because it's my husband's. I don't know what to do, and I'm just venting because I feel awful, and I feel like I failed as a wife. I don't know if I should confront my husband, but I'm thinking about
leaving my wife after 15 years together. I'm not asking for advice, and I'm not going to change my mind. I'm tired of her criticizing everything I do, always complaining when the kids ask her for something, and just in general her bad attitude. My wife June, fake name, and I are 35 years old, been together since 15 and married at 26. After 6 months of being together, even though we were young, I asked her if she ever saw herself being a mother because I knew I've always wanted 2 kids, and I wanted to be on the same page with my partner. She said yes, she wanted kids of her own, but if I had known this was how nasty she was going to be, I would have left her. The first 3 years of our relationship were amazing. My parents loved her and vice versa. At 18 I knew I wanted to wife her up. The relationship started going downhill when we both went to college. She was 3 hours away from where I went to school at and made me come see her every weekend. Anytime I asked her if she'd come see me instead because I didn't have money for gas to drive all the way to her or money for a bus ticket, she'd make an excuse as to why she couldn't come or complain about how her friends' boyfriends would come and see them every weekend without complaint, and I'd suck it up and borrow money or use up my savings. This was the first red flag I ignored because I thought I was in love. Somehow things became worse after school. When we started working, I saved up to get my own place to stay at while she was still with her parents. When times become tough and I was low on money and couldn't afford my bills and groceries, my parents allowed me to stay at their place since I bought my house and didn't rent it, so I could just lock it up and come back when I wanted to. Apparently me moving out when I was struggling was an inconvenience to her. In her defense, she didn't have anywhere to go to when she was bored. Second red flag I ignored as she kept saying, as a man, how do your parents still pay your bills? I don't know why I married her after she humiliated me because of the present I gave her for her birthday. Her 26th birthday was coming up, so I decided to propose to her on her birthday and plan a small surprise for her to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Apparently that was tacky and cheap of me to propose at her birthday gathering. Now I always knew she wanted me to go all out for her proposal, and I was saving up for that, but since I wanted her to know I was serious about her and wanted to marry her, I proposed with a ring with an emerald gem. She flipped. She kept on talking about how small the ring was, and how she was disappointed in this cheap engagement. I told her about how I was saving up to give her the grand proposal she wanted, but then she told me she would have preferred to wait than wear that cheap ring. Still, I went ahead and married her. She was a complete pain in the butt during the wedding preparations. She kept on dismissing any ideas I had, and told me to let her handle all the planning, and I should just pay and watch. I let it go as I wanted peace. Now the kids. We have twin girls, 2 years old and absolute bundles of joy. When she first gave birth to them she was grumpy all the time and almost hit them once because they were crying. I took them to my parents' house for the weekend and gave her the scolding of her lifetime. She blamed it on her postpartum depression and said she'd go to therapy for it. The last straw for me was when she didn't pick me up on time from the airport, so I missed my girl's birthday. That's when I knew I was over her bull crap. She told me she was asleep when our girls were playing alone outside the house where the party was with no adult supervision because their friends' parents dropped them off and left. I'm keeping them with me when I sack her. There's no way in heck I'm letting her have my house. There are so many other incidents I can list, but for the sake of time I'm ending it here. Her birthday is in 2 weeks and she's always wanted to go to Greece, so I'm going to put the divorce papers in an envelope and name it Greece tickets, and hide it in plain sight. She has no idea what's about to hit her insensitive, abusive self. I hope she's miserable.
I think I destroyed my relationship with the most amazing man I've ever met. I, 39 female, just ended a 10-year relationship with my ex, 32 male, let's call him L. We first crossed paths at the gym, shortly after I had escaped a 12-year-long abusive relationship, and not long after he had finished college. We also have a 4-year-old son together. L was amazing. He's intelligent, attentive, and incredibly considerate. He remembered every little detail about everything because his memory was uncannily accurate, a great advantage since I tend to be forgetful. There was just one issue that caused friction between us, and that was his high intimate drive. Not that mine was low, but it was nowhere near his level. For the initial 5.5 years, everything was perfect. We relocated to the United States, and L took on all the costs until I adapted to our new home. He got me a puppy to combat my loneliness, and often took me out on dates to keep my mind off his crazy busy schedule as he's always working, 60-hour work weeks. At the age of 35, we decided to start a family, and I got pregnant almost immediately. However, from the 4th month of my pregnancy, I began feeling self-conscious about my appearance. The thought of being exposed or intimate made me uncomfortable, reducing our once frequent intimate encounters to twice a month. Yet, Elle was as supportive and understanding as ever. After our baby was born, I spiraled into postpartum depression, and my intimate drive plummeted to zero. Elle was increasingly frustrated, but he stuck around. Then one day, he stopped asking for lovemaking altogether. Apart from that, we were the perfect family. No fights, just love and care. Then came a day when we had a huge argument about him buying a PlayStation. During that quarrel, Al confessed how dejected he felt having to beg for intimacy or even a kiss. His confession hit me hard. To cope, he resumed his gym routine, managing to shed a significant amount of weight. He looked incredible, and I promised to work on improving our intimate life, but I failed, and our arguments persisted. One day, a bombshell landed in the form of a text message from an unknown number. Al had been cheating on me for the past 10 months. I confronted him, and he confirmed it, saying it was because of our lacking intimate life. In a fit of rage, I broke his PlayStation and threw him out. After a week of his absence, I realized how much I missed him. I longed for his compliments, his help around the house, and the way he was with our son. He returned a week later to collect his belongings before moving in with the woman he cheated on me with. He still said he loved me. Now, when he comes to pick up our son on Thursdays, it crushes me to see him. He looks as handsome as ever, always so polite. All I want to do is cry, knowing that I might have lost him forever because I couldn't meet his intimate need. My boyfriend and best friend are in love with each other. For some context, Delaney is my best friend since high school, and my boyfriend Adam and I have been together for 2 years. All three of us would hang out together. I saw the relationship between Delaney and Adam as a friendly banter, that of a brother and a sister. Delaney never spoke down on Adam, nor Adam of Delaney. Of course, they'd have disagreements, but I always saw it as something funny like children fighting. I noticed the signs when Delaney started saying that she didn't want Adam to hang out with us. She said she just wanted it to be her, and I always left his phone around me, and I really didn't think anything of it, so I checked it because I had messaged Delaney, but she never responded. The first message she sent was, "I feel horrible and I love her, but I can't help how I feel about you. You need to choose because you can't have both." Apparently Adam and Delaney had hooked up a few months ago after Valentine's Day, and almost all the time since. I remember when Adam brought Delaney and I flowers and on Valentine's Day, but I only thought of it as a friendly gesture. Delaney was so happy, it was all she talked about. She kept telling me how lucky I was, but as my best friend, I didn't think it would mean she'd do this. I read more messages, times when Delaney and Adam said they were hanging out with friends, or doing overtime at work. They were with each other. They had sent each other exposed photos, and Adam had even compared me and Delaney's bodies. She had been trying to convince Adam to tell me about them and leave me, hoping I would understand that they were in love, but apparently Adam was still in love with me, and didn't want to let me go. Delaney was always there for me, supportive and kind, the most beautiful person I'd ever known, and Adam, the love of my life, who would have given his last dollar if it meant I'd be okay, was an old soul, someone you could always depend on. So I don't understand why they'd do this to me. I used my phone to take pictures of everything, and when Adam came back out, I told him my mom had an emergency and I had to leave. I needed some time to process what I was feeling and think about my next steps. I spent the whole night crying and reading over all the messages I'd collected. After losing myself and crying myself to sleep, I woke up the next morning and took a long shower. I pondered for a bit but ultimately decided that no friend or boyfriend should treat me this way, and I needed to do something about it. I haven't confronted Delaney or Adam, though they've both texted me asking if I'm alright. I'll probably sit them both down together and handle this like adults. I'm almost 30. I thought maybe we'd get married one day, and Delaney would be my maid of honor. I thought wrong.
What is the most inappropriate thing a teacher has ever done in class? Well, not really a teacher, but my principal. My high school had a strict policy on cell phones every morning. We were expected to turn them into a basket in the office and we couldn't get them back until after the afternoon. Announcements. During the last week of my junior year, I had a religion final. I usually kept my phone hidden in my locker, but that day I had totally forgotten about the exam and had left it in my bag. We were almost out of time for the exam. About 15 minutes left when someone's phone went off. Everyone instantly looked at me since they knew I liked to keep my phone on me, but it wasn't. I usually turned it off to save battery. The classroom was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Miss C slowly stood up, looked around the room, and then walked into the hallway to call the office. I took this moment to rummage through my bag, and find my phone powered off. I quickly hid it in a thick folder. When she came back, she told everyone to stay behind so we could sort it out. The last 15 minutes of that final went by agonizingly slow. My heart was beating out of my chest as I tried to finish the short essay section. It wasn't my phone. So whose could it have been? What if my phone made some kind of noise because it had died? What if she finds my phone and I fail? I had never gotten a detention or bad grade because I was that student. All the teachers liked me. When afternoon announcements came on over the loudspeaker, I almost slouched with relief. But then the principal's voice came on and started speaking to us. Students in room L1, stay in your seats until further notice. A few minutes later, the principal's secretary came to our door. She made all of us line up, single file. None of us were allowed to leave the room until she went through each and every one of our bags. She then instructed us to walk to my teacher and turn our pockets inside out to prove we didn't have any electronics. Mind you, this is only a religion final that the teacher made up. Not even a state exam or anything that would really stop us from passing. There was another kid in my class named Nick, who also carried his phone around a lot among other forbidden things. He was well known by all the teachers in the school and also the local law enforcement. So me and Nick stood waiting at the back of the line. Was it you? I asked him. My phone is turned off. Nick. I swear to God if I get penalized for this. He shrugged and jumped in line ahead of me. We stood there for at least 40 minutes waiting for each person ahead of us to get cleared. When it was Nick's turn, I instantly knew it was him. He slowly took everything out of his bag as if trying to delay the inevitable. His bag ended up passing, but then the teacher checked his desk. Lo and behold, there was his cracked Samsung with a missed call. The teacher and secretary both walked him to the office and I was free to go home. But this isn't the end of it. As I walked upstairs to the main entrance, there was a group of boys standing outside the principal's door talking to Ms. C. I tried to speed walk to the door, but not even 15 feet outside. I hear my name. Sadie, come here. I crossed my fingers and hoped she would just tell me to not bring my phone to class and to not hang out with Nick, but she pulled me into a classroom. She then proceeded to go through each and every one of my folders until she found my phone. I was mortified. She was invading my privacy. What gives her the right to be able to just go through my stuff like that? My anxiety got the best of me, and I finally burst into tears. I'm sorry, I forgot the final was today. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She told me she was giving my phone to the principal and I wouldn't get it back until further notice later that afternoon. My mom got a phone call from the principal. I don't know what exactly was exchanged, but I know my mom was on my side. She reassured me that my teacher said she wouldn't penalize my grade, but the principal wanted to keep my phone for the whole summer. I was livid, to say the least. My dad was also very angry that my teacher, the secretary, and the principal had violated my privacy and he agreed I couldn't go a whole summer without my phone. I had a job, friends, and most importantly, I had bought and maintained the phone with my own money. My dad told my mom to go to the office the next day and demand that they give me back my personal property. This was the one time I was thankful my dad had a temper. Adult entertainment workers, who was your most memorable customer? I took the V card of a terminally ill 41-year-old woman. Now I can't stop thinking about her. I am a male escort. My customers are mostly gay men and middle-aged women, so she was in no way a surprise for me. So this woman wanted me to meet her at a hotel room she specifically booked for us. I already knew a few things about her because of the messages she sent me. Like her name, her age, and that she never had a relationship. Let alone that she was ever intimate with anyone. When we met, we greeted each other and she had a huge smile on her face. The first rule with my customers is that we get to know each other before we do what we do. We talked for about half an hour and I found out that she had leukemia and was about to die. She also told me that she never found a boyfriend because of her looks. She was constantly called ugly and disgusting and no boy wanted to be near her. And this bullying continued during her adulthood. She was always treated like some kind of a weirdo. She just thought that she had to wait for the right one, but after so many years she lost hope and accepted that she is supposed to be lonely. And now that she's 41 and never been intimate, she felt like she missed out on the most beautiful things in life. Her parents died many years ago and she had no one. She was all by herself. The money she wanted to pay me with was the money she was about to use for her treatment. She told me that the doctors said that the treatment would only give her a little bit more time but not save her life. So she figured she could use it to finally find out what it's like to be intimate. I almost teared up a bit, but I forced myself to stay professional and just listen to what she had to say. When she was done, we did what we did and afterwards she was smiling big and said she hasn't felt this good in years. She asked me if I could lay down with her and cuddle. She said she'd pay more if I did that. I said yes. We laid down, turned on the TV and she laid in my arms. I then saw what I assumed to be happy tears rolling down her face and she snuggled closer to me and closed her eyes. This was the cutest thing I've ever seen. We laid there for 2 hours. She slept in my arms and I woke her up and told her I had to leave now. She nodded and turned around and grabbed her wallet. I told her she doesn't have to pay me. I gave her my number and told her to visit me whenever she feels alone and needs someone to be with. She visited me 2 times before she died and called me every day. On one of her visits, I bought her a bouquet of flowers and placed a bunch of roses from the doorway to the bed. I cooked for her and we watched a movie before being intimate. She cried again that night and so did I. She told me she thought she would die alone. That while this may not mean much for me, it meant the world to her. She thanked me repeatedly and cried uncontrollably. We became friends in the short time I knew her. I even attended her funeral. It made me sad how few people were there. She was such a soft and kind-hearted human being. I can't stop thinking about her. She deserved so much better in life. I had many customers over the years and many of them had sad stories, but for some reason her story is the one that sticks with me. What disturbing secret did you discover about your partner after getting married? I just found out my wife slept with another man 4 years ago. We've been together for 5. My wife and I got married 3 years ago, after dating for 2 years prior. Her sister got married 2 weekends ago and, of course, my wife was at the wedding party. As you'd expect, she spent the 2 weeks before the wedding helping her sister get everything ready. This wasn't a big deal at all. She kept me in the loop and I knew this was going to happen. A few hours before the ceremony on Saturday morning, I showed up hoping to see her before everything became hectic. I didn't want to intrude, knowing she was busy, but I hadn't seen her since Tuesday. Seeing me outside her parents' house, she sent her brother out to tell me she'd come to see me in the car. I found this a bit odd, but I let it slide. When she finally came out, she sat next to me, gave me a kiss, and instead of being happy to see me, she told me that we needed to talk and that she didn't want her sister's big day to be ruined. She told me that at the reception, I might hear some stories about the best man and her, and she didn't want it to be awkward or strange. I was just stunned. She admitted that around 4 years ago, she'd had a fling with him, but that it didn't mean anything. She said she knew I tend to get jealous, and wanted me to know in advance so that I wouldn't be surprised. I was stunned. This was not the start to my day I had imagined, but I told her I appreciated the information and that it certainly wasn't a big deal now. She went back inside the house, and I left to eat lunch, planning to meet her at the church. While I was eating and looking at my phone, it dawned on me that she had said the fling happened 4 years ago, but we'd been together for 5. At first, I thought she had just told me the wrong time, but then I started to remember a year and a half into our relationship when she was acting strangely, was unavailable when she usually was, and went on 2 weekend camping trips with work friends. I was quite unsettled by this, but I knew I had a long day ahead of me. I attended the wedding and watched everything, keeping my feelings to myself. After the wedding, as I was congratulating the bride and groom, the best man was there and my wife was standing with another guy. I just acted as if it was no big deal. At the reception, I waited a long time for them to arrive because of the photos. When my wife finally arrived and sat with me, I decided not to say anything so as not to distract from the day. However, she then told me that she would be dancing with the best man as the bridesmaids and groomsmen were set to dance. I questioned this, but she told me the maid of honor and her partner were actually married and wanted to dance with each other. I was a bit upset, but I tried not to let it show. Thankfully, I chose not to drink, knowing that I can become angry when intoxicated. She was socializing with everyone around her, and then the dance came. The best man came over, extended his arm, and she got up. I made a point not to watch. After the dance, they returned, joking and reminiscing about old times and places, and she decided to introduce us. I was less than cordial, which didn't seem to deter him from sitting and chatting with her for a few minutes. The more they talked, the angrier I became. Eventually, I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was gone. She accused me of being rude, which I didn't want to hear. I told her this wasn't the time or place to discuss it, but we would certainly talk later. She then announced that she was going to change clothes and tell her sister that we were leaving because I had ruined her day. I told her that I was capable of not causing drama for the rest of the day, and I would prefer to stay. She came back changed and upset. Despite me not having said anything and even shaking the other guy's hand, she claimed I was visibly miserable and that's what she was reacting to. She insisted on leaving, so I said if she really wanted to go, we could, but if she'd rather stay, I'd be happy to stay, or I could leave since I had my own car. At first, she said we should stay, but then suggested if I couldn't improve my behavior, I should leave. I asked how I was misbehaving, and she said it was obvious I was upset, and that I was acting like a silverback gorilla ready to fight. I was taken aback. I returned inside and sat down while she mingled with the guests. I spoke with her brother for a while but eventually ended up back at our table talking with her grandma. We left at the same time, and I arrived home just before she did. I was sitting in the living room waiting for her when she arrived, and I immediately asked her to clarify the story about the best man. She repeated her initial account. After staring at her for a while, I asked her if she was sure about the time frame, and she confirmed. I then reminded her that we'd been together for a year when this fling occurred. Her reaction was unexpected. Instead of denying it or seeming flustered, she simply said, "I know." She then explained that they worked together, and it was just a physical thing. She thought we weren't in a good place at the time and never intended to leave me, she was just having some fun for a few weekends. She said it was probably a mistake to tell me now, but she didn't want me to get blindsided. I did not react the way she thought I would. We ended up having a massive argument, and it concluded when she accused me of being childish. I told her I needed time to think and she told me there was nothing to think about. We loved each other and this didn't change anything. That was 2 weeks ago and I still am not over it. She has been trying the past few days to get me to talk to her, but I admit that for whatever reason I'm not viewing her the same as I did before this. Part of me is like that this is stupid, it happened a few years ago and we are married now and there hasn't been any problems at all. But then part of me is like I just found out she cheated on me and it hurts. What makes it worse is that instead of trying to understand how I feel, she is trying to guilt me into just not even thinking about it. I don't know what to do. Abused kids, what childhood norm has continued to stick with you? My father told me not to cry. Men don't cry. I'm a 22-year-old man raised by a very traditional single dad. Among the many ideals my dad instilled in me was that crying was a sign of weakness in men. So most of the time, my dad would reprimand me if I came to him crying. It ranged from small things, like spilling juice on my pants, to being bullied at school. He said, if you're breaking down about these issues, you're never going to make it in life. I would hide my tears like an alcoholic would hide booze. Eventually, I grew up to be the strong silent type in school and in adulthood. If being emotional meant hurting myself or someone else, it seemed better to just not show them at all. Fast forward a few years. I have this girlfriend, Katie, that I've been seeing for a few months. Most girls were turned off by me being so reserved, but Katie had this talent for seeing that I wasn't just mean or cold to people. I was hurting. She treated me like a decent human, so I did my best to be a gentleman to her while still staying reserved. My dad told me it was important that a man never let his own feelings keep him from protecting and being respectful to women. About a week ago, Katie called saying her mom died in the hospital due to complications from a disease and asked me to come to the funeral. Now, I never knew what having a mom was like, so as the preacher described Katie's mom during the sermon, it sounded like everything I wished I had as a kid. Someone who was gentle and nurturing. Someone who'd understand my feelings rather than criticize them. Someone who'd let me cry on their shoulder like I'd done for Katie many times. It was overpowering. I felt the tears coming in, and Katie looked at me in surprise. By force of habit, I didn't dare let myself cry. I took a deep breath, swallowed the lump in my throat, and just gave Katie another hug. After the service, I drove Katie home. It was pretty quiet until, out of nowhere, she went off on me. She said I cared more about looking like a macho man who didn't cry than letting her know how I felt. She said things like, I'm sorry your dad is stuck in the Stone Age and I've opened up to you so much, but you never do the same for me. I didn't answer until she said, is your male ego really that fragile? I pleaded with her and said enough and please stop. But she wouldn't. Normally, I wasn't fazed by someone berating me thanks to my dad. However, after a while, I couldn't take it anymore. I just let her vent at me until I stopped at her house. When we got there, cold as ice, I said get out. She seemed to get the hint that I was pissed and ran into her apartment like a scared child. Now, I wasn't sure if what I did was right anymore. It had become a habit of mine to avoid showing vulnerability. But when I dropped her off, I started to wonder if Katie had a point about having a male ego. I realized it wasn't fair to me or Katie if she was looking for someone to relate to, and I refused to give that to her. Especially when she was grieving. A day later, I drove over to her house. As soon as she opened the door, she apologized for lashing out. She admitted to acting out of grief, not out of spite or a need to control me. The situation turned into one of the most profound moments of my life. As we were making amends, Katie gave me a copy of her mom's funeral on video. We both watched it together. This time, I found the courage to cry for the first time in 7.5 years. Hearing everyone describe Katie's mom had tapped into my inner child. The sad, lonely, little boy longing for the warmth and affection that he didn't get from his only parent. Katie, despite her own grief, showed me nothing but kindness throughout my mental breakdown. All this time, I'd been seeing my own feelings as being invalid compared to hers. Katie just said, my mom always made me feel safe whenever I was sad. Now, I want to do the same for you. Bless her heart. Now, our relationship is stronger than ever. We're both looking after each other, but also seeking our own means of support to avoid being too dependent. I've finally started on my long overdue journey toward healing from my trauma and improving my mental health. I saw videos of my fiancée cheating during her bachelorette party and don't know what to do. My girlfriend and I were together for 4 years, and we were engaged to be married. Last weekend, she had her bachelorette party. I didn't have a problem with it, especially after what she told me was the plan. She and some friends were going to rent a big place with like 4 bedrooms, and they were just going to get trashed and party and hang out. On the day of the party, she was at my place, a 2-bedroom apartment where one room is used as my home office. I am a self-employed investor. She made all the arrangements and went to meet her friends. We texted a little, but as the party warmed up, we stopped, and I figured they were just having fun. After midnight, I started getting ready for bed and noticed that the computer in my office wasn't turned off. The black screen was just a screensaver. It turns out my fiancée had not logged out, and her messenger was still open on the computer. There was a group chat where she and the girls had been planning everything, and a lot of videos were uploaded to the chat. I was a little curious, so I started watching some of the videos. Most of them were pretty innocent, just a group of 15 girls getting drunk, stoned, dancing and whatever. Then there was a video of a woman going to the front door, and about 10 guys entered the apartment. I didn't know who they were, and I didn't recognize anyone. There were a couple of videos of the guys and girls dancing and drinking, and then the worst happened. A video started of my fiancée making out with a guy on the sofa. She stopped and rolled over and started making out with a second guy. Then there was a video of her and the 2 guys going into a bedroom. There was also a video of them coming out that, according to the timestamps, was 5 minutes later. However, that doesn't mean anything. For all I know, the videos were an hour apart, and they were all just uploaded at the same time. Seeing all this was like a sledgehammer to the gut. I walked into the bathroom because I thought I would be sick. I wasn't, but I feel like I paced back and forth in the apartment for about 30 minutes. Then I poured myself a rocks glass full of whiskey and chugged it down. I saved the videos and then made one of my own, just a short little selfie video of me saying, "Hi, this is Jason, your ex-fiancé. Just wanted to say I saw the videos from the party, and the wedding is off. I hope it was worth it." I'm glad I saved the videos because in less than 10 minutes, they were all deleted. Soon after, my phone started blowing up, but I didn't answer any calls or texts. At first, it was just my girlfriend texting, saying she can explain and it's not what it looked like. Then her friends joined in, but I ignored everyone and didn't respond. Then suddenly, I got a request for a video chat, and I'll admit my curiosity got the better of me. I answered the call but didn't say anything. It was my fiancée sitting in front of the camera, and she looked like she had been crying, with her friends just around her. I really only know maybe 4 of the friends, but I recognized a lot of the others. First, she started apologizing but kept saying it wasn't what it looked like. It was just a party, and the guys coming over were not planned or anything like that. She said it might have looked bad, but nothing happened. When I didn't say anything, she just kept going on with more of the same, and her friends backed her up. The more I didn't speak, the more hysterical she got. Eventually, she admitted to kissing the 2 guys but dumped the blame on her friends. They all took responsibility for that, which surprised me a little. She said the kisses didn't mean anything, and that's all that happened. Then she seemed to remember the video of her going into the bedroom, and she started screaming that it was just a joke, and nothing happened. All the other women confirmed it was just a joke, and that my fiancé had walked into the room and then turned around and walked out again. This just kept going on, and they just kept repeating themselves. Eventually, everyone got quiet, and all I said was, "Is there anything else to add?" She said no, and I just ended the video call. I knew she was lying. I went on social media and changed my relationship status to single and posted that the wedding was off, and if anyone had bought a present, they should feel free to return it. My fiancé saw the post and started freaking out even more, and she just kept insisting that all she did was kiss and nothing else. I sent her a text saying if I found out that she or any of her friends are lying to everyone about what happened or trying to make me the bad guy, Then I will post all the videos online. Right now, no one else knows what's happening. This was a couple of days ago, and everything for the wedding was cancelled. My fiancé just keeps pursuing me. Any advice on what I should do from here? People related to psychopaths, at what point did you realize your life was in danger? My nephew is a little psychopath. Once, when he was 9 years old, the entire family was playing hide and seek. He didn't like where I hid, so he flew into a rage and tried to hit me. I grabbed his wrist and twisted it just enough to subdue him, which made him scream like a freaking maniac. I released him, and he ran into another room, saying he needed his Nerf gun to shoot me because he shoots people whenever he's mad. I looked at my sister-in-law and said, "Seriously, are you okay with this?" Her response was that his rage was my fault since I had no right to touch him, and I should have just let him hit me because he's only a boy. I firmly told her that if her aggressive little serial killer ever even appeared to harm one of my children, I would put him down like a rabid dog. Fortunately, her husband, my wife's parents, and everyone else present told her that she was wrong, and that her kid's behavior was concerning and a serious red flag. Flash forward 2 years, and the kid is still difficult, but everyone seems to ignore it because he's still just a boy. I'm staying at their house, and things have mostly settled since that prior incident. One day, I wake up very early, around 4:30 a.m. I don't want to disturb anyone, so I just sort of lie there and meditate. At around 5:20 a.m., the door opens. Thinking it's my kids, who were young at the time and used to wake us up early, I glance up. Then I notice that it's my nephew, and he's holding what appears to be an AR-15 toy gun. Now, I suffer from PTSD from Iraq. So, my fight or flight response is triggered, my heart is pounding and I'm basically in survival mode. I wait and watch. He creeps past the foot of the bed, walks up to my side, and raises the rifle to point the muzzle at my face. So I figure, this is it. I'm going to die. I've gone on multiple tours and taken gunfire from seasoned terrorists, but this little psycho will be the one who does me in. Today it ends. My only goal at that moment is to prevent him from harming my wife and kids. He raises the rifle, and the muzzle is now a few inches from my face. I reach up, grab the muzzle, and push as hard as I can, sending the butt into the little psycho's face. He screams in pain. His nose is bleeding, he's crying, he's screaming about how he's going to kill me, and how I'm freaking dead. Now everyone is awake. Lights are flipped on, and I realize it's just a toy rifle made to look like an AR-15. Apparently, this little psycho was planning to stick the muzzle in my face, pull the trigger, and simultaneously scare the hell out of me with flashing lights and electronic gun sounds. I felt somewhat torn. On one hand, I broke an 11-year-old's nose for playing with a toy gun. On the other hand, the kid had all these signs that he was dangerous, and his behavior was super creepy and raised yet another red flag. My sister-in-law was freaking pissed. Her chosen narrative was that I was a mentally unstable lunatic who posed a danger to all children. She called the cops and insisted, despite my wife's protests, on having me arrested. She wanted me charged with child abuse for hitting a boy for playing with his toys. The police arrived, and the interviews took the whole day. I was worried that, aside from the arrest, I might not be able to leave and go home the next day as planned since the investigation might not be finished. Fortunately, it didn't play out that way. See, this little jerk wasn't just acting crazy around me like in the movies. He displayed dangerous behavior everywhere and had been doing so for years. The police had a file on him because the school was required to call them every time he threatened a shooting, which was often. I explained my version of events. I told them I didn't see him and had a flashback thinking he was an insurgent. So when I saw him, I understood what was going through his head, and wanted to try to prevent him from hurting my family. They allowed me to return home on schedule. A week later, the detective called me to inform me that there would be no charges. He also told me that his interview with my nephew was chilling, and he hopes my sister-in-law wakes up to the reality of the situation and gets the kid some help. I told him she won't ever, and when he's 30 years old and on trial, she'll be crying and saying he's just a boy. To prevent any further incidents, I now refuse to stay at their house. Whenever we're in town, we stay in a hotel. He is never allowed to be alone with my kids. In addition, he is no longer allowed in my house after he was caught trying to steal a pocket knife. He was 12 at the time, and claimed he needed it for surgery on the family cat. I honestly hope the little psycho doesn't hurt anyone and gets better. Unfortunately, I know the odds are stacked against that hope.
Parents who have disabled children, do you regret having them? Yes, I hate that little vegetable. My husband's daughter is 13 and was born mentally disabled. She is not very high functioning, but can be so sweet and friendly. However, most of the time she is extremely stubborn, unhygienic, antagonistic, and has explosive outbursts which result in her trying to hurt us. She lives with her mom and visits us on the weekends. She has an older brother whom she absolutely plagues. I mean, this boy can't even go to the bathroom without her following him and juggling the knot the entire time. She sits practically on top of him on the couch and then cries that he's teasing her. If we tell her to move away, she sits and stretches out her arm or leg so she's touching him in some way. She stares at whoever told her to move like daring them to say something to her so it constantly feels like a showdown. If he's sitting behind her she holds up a pillow so he can't see the TV for no reason. It is insanely miserable. It is so unfair to this kid that he just has to deal with it all the time. He's 15 so he can luckily go off with his friends but they can't even come here together on weekends. It's so tense and miserable. She absolutely loves me and while that's sweet, she seeks out my attention when I'm already overwhelmed and will not stop until I look at whatever she's showing me and react in some way. She will literally spend 30 minutes if she has to poking me so I look at some stupid drawing she made. I once looked at one of these drawings and it was a disturbing depiction of her unaliving her brother. She follows me everywhere and asks a million questions when I'm just trying to get through the day. She also has a litany of disgusting behaviors that I am having a ton of problems dealing with. She got her period last year and she gets blood everywhere. She lies if I even ask her if she's having her period. I usually find blood somewhere and guess for myself. She hates showering and her hair is disgustingly greasy and she has awful body odor. If we make her shower, it's an absolute battle. She will make the entire house miserable over the smallest issue and once destroyed the bathroom while showering just to spite us. She shouts and pouts and goes to tease everyone else, including the younger kids and the dog. She follows her dad and tells him he's stupid. She follows me and if I ignore her tantrum, she screams my name until I react to her. Last week out of absolutely nowhere she took a poop on the floor of my 5-year-old daughter's room. They're probably the closest out of all the kids and the behavior was totally new and unexpected. I found it and asked her what happened. Of course she lied and said it wasn't her. She lies about absolutely everything. You cannot get the truth no matter how hard you try. She knows that at our house you don't get in trouble for telling the truth, but even so she lies all the time. So just the conversation was a 45-minute affair. Finally, after like 29 different versions, she admitted to pooping on the floor. When I asked her why she pooped on the floor, she said because it was fun. She also admitted to doing it at her grandparents' house, in their bedroom. She never told anyone, just apparently took a dump and just left it for them to find. I'm so exhausted by her. My husband just asked me if she could come this weekend and I got the biggest pit in my stomach.
What is the most tragic secret a lover has revealed to you? I started texting a beautiful woman. I knew she was out of my league. I'm a 50-year-old overweight and out-of-shape Caucasian guy. She was a 30-year-old elegant, college-educated, and stunningly beautiful black woman. Nonetheless, after a few days of texting, I invited her to join me for dinner at a very nice restaurant downtown. To my dismay, she actually accepted my invitation. I was waiting for her at the bar, and when she walked in, my jaw hit the floor. She was so beautiful I literally lost my breath for a moment. She was taller than me in her heels and was wearing a beautiful short dress with the most amazing legs I'd ever seen. She greeted me with a bright smile and a gentle hug and we were escorted to our table. We had a very good date, the conversation flowed, and she seemed to have a good time as well. We decided to continue the date and went to a couple of bars for drinks. Finally, she said it was time to go home and, since she had taken Uber earlier, I offered to give her a ride home. She quickly agreed. All this time, I thought that even though the date was fun and comfortable, it would lead to a friendship at best considering the obvious differences between us. Well, when we got to her place, we talked for a few minutes more. I offered to walk her to her door but she declined. She then got out and walked around to my side of the car. She leaned through the window and planted a very brief but intimate kiss on my lips. My heart stopped. She then leaned back and smiled. I was able to stammer out an invitation to go out again and she accepted without hesitation. I was on cloud 9. I knew that this remarkable woman would have a profound effect on my life. It seemed predestined. For the next couple of weeks, she and I were seeing each other nearly every day and I was developing strong feelings already. But, something was wrong. I had a weird nagging sense that she was hiding something. Although she was being very affectionate, something just felt off. Then, finally it happened. We were out at a bar together. It was a good time but she seemed distracted. As we were leaving she turned to me and said, in a serious tone, "We need to talk." I thought, this is it, the differences between us are too much for her and I'm about to be friend-zoned. But nothing prepared me for what came next. She asked me to just listen and not say anything. I agreed. She then started out by saying that she had developed strong feelings for me but there was something that I needed to know about her that might make me want to change my mind about pursuing a relationship. My mind was spinning and so many scenarios raced through my head. Is she married? Is she a criminal? Then I remembered a few days earlier when we were making out. I had touched her chest lightly and realized that she had implants. She looked at me, and with a tear in her eye, she told me that she has stage 4 breast cancer. She was originally diagnosed 4 years earlier with stage 3 and had beaten it. Now, it had returned to stage 4 and she was to start chemo again in 2 weeks. I was floored. She then stated that she would understand if I wanted to turn and run and she wouldn't think less of me for it. I reiterated that I adored her, thought she was an amazing woman, and if she wanted me to take this journey with her, I would be honored to do so. We kissed and just held each other for a while. Finally, she said goodnight and went to her car to go home. I cried all the way home. We had a full amazing year together. I had to go to Japan for work and she met me there in between chemo treatments. She never cried and was always elegant. I learned what the true definition of grace meant. We lived a lifetime in 2014. On February 12, 2015, she passed away. What was the greatest revenge you ever got on a spoiled child? I'm like Batman for spoiled children except I only use farts. I'm about 6 feet 7 inches so even when I'm just trying to be friendly and meeting a family member's or friend's kid for the first time, I've noticed they get very high between their mother's legs intimidated on sight if I'm not sitting down. So it's not hard for me to intimidate a child, especially when I'm trying to. However, a few times I've been called out. One time I was pretty drunk with a friend at a Target buying Risk. This little 7-year-old with a mohawk was being an insufferable little turd in the action figure section. I heard him from like 5 aisles over and it was like nails on a chalkboard. I tell my friend, I'm gonna fart on this kid's head. Watch and learn. I saunter on over to the aisle in question and see the vile little guy calling his mom an idiot for not buying him a huge G.I. Joe the movie vehicle. The kid's choice in toy pissed me off even more considering how awful that movie was. I already bought that one for you and you broke it by throwing it down the stairs. Shut up. I need it. It's the only one I don't have now. The mother was younger than me, I'm mid-20s, and gave a defeated look. I don't have enough money right now. The kid screamed, "You are an idiot," and continued to just berate and publicly shame this woman. At the time, I was on a strict Chipotle carnitas burrito diet. And while I was watching all this, my stomach gave me an initial warning gurgle telling me I was about an hour away from punishing the toilet. Destiny was calling. I inch a bit closer to my prey, inspecting some wrestling toys. The kid shouts, "Screw you, I hate you." The mom rolls her eyes and turns her back to the kid to ignore him. And could you believe it, the kid gets on his hands and knees and starts taking the toy out of the box. It's go time. I position my back towards him and at this point I'm like 2 feet away from him. His head is down, getting frustrated with those twisty tie things, and I go for it. I bend down to reach for the one of the toys on the lower shelf. At this point, my butt is inches away from this kid's head. Now, generally speaking, the best way to go about this is to act casual, drop your belly bomb, then walk away after a few seconds like nothing is out of the ordinary. I usually go one all over and listen to the kid's reaction and delight. However, today I couldn't help myself. I have my head tilted back looking at this kid out of the corner of my eye, to ensure accuracy. I'm so close that from a distance it looks like I'm about to sit on him. My friend sees this happening and can no longer contain himself. He's covering his mouth, but his hee-haw hyperventilating donkey chortle is fairly audible over the late 90s pop music playing on the loudspeakers. The kid immediately looks up towards the laughter, but can't help but notice there is a butt now directly in his face. Now, I'm trying not to laugh but also panicking as I just made eye contact with him. He furrows his brow and I look over in the mother's direction, still back towards us. I relish in the moment and the look on this child's confused and naive face. The initial blast was mighty and boisterous. I swear I saw his hair blowing in the wind. If I wasn't wearing jeans, I think it could have probably blown over an empty soda can. I would call it a very fun fart. However, what immediately followed that out the chamber was truly horrifying. The fart's implication changed without notice and swiftly. It went from a joyous, dry air horn squeal to a nefarious, hissing release. I think the little moppet noticed the hateful metamorphosis before even I did because he twisted his neck violently trying to get away from the personified evil being fumigated into his soul. Because of his positioning, it was all in vain as the only wayward. And forward would mean certain doom. I had positioned myself well on the higher ground, free to escape or relent at any time. Immobilized, all he could do was bide his time until the cruel attack was over. Obviously, this child needed to reread Sun Tzu's Fart of War. In total, it lasted about 4 seconds but for that kid, it must have seemed like time when I found out what my 8-year-old son was saving up for. It destroyed me. When I was 16 years old, I was stupid. I didn't wear protection and I got a girl pregnant. I was shocked. I never expected to have a kid that early. I didn't know if I regretted it or not. Almost all of my regrets washed away when my son was born. For privacy purposes, we will call him Rory. I am 24 now, and my son is almost 8. He is the smartest and most loving kid I could ever ask for. His mom left when he was around 2. When I tried to sue for child support, the judge sided with her, stating that I was the father and needed to step up. Ever since then, it has been me and Rory against the world. I have been a single dad to Rory since then. I have had a few girlfriends, but nothing serious. I left my parents' place and got a small apartment. I dropped out of high school, which I still immensely regret, but hey, life happens. During this time, my neighbors helped me raise my son. They were an older couple next door whose kids had moved out long before, so they were fine with babysitting him after school and during late shifts. I am a manager at McDonald's. I make lousy money, but it is enough to get by. Then, 2 years ago, our terrible building manager raised the rent for everyone. I had to work even harder to find a place to live during a pandemic. My parents had left the state, and I wasn't ready to uproot my kid's entire life just because his dad couldn't provide for him. Every birthday, since before he was 3, I took Rory to Golden Corral. Usually it was on his birthday, but there were other occasions when we went. It was really good for him, and he really enjoyed it. I hadn't been able to take him for the past 2 years due to money being very tight. Sometimes I get tipped at McDonald's. A quarter here, a dime here, a dollar here and there. I'll always bring it to him every day and give it to Rory to save. Well, 2 days ago, Rory brought me his money jug and dumped it all out in front of me. He was so excited and began counting it out. There was around $40 there, and he jumped up excitedly. I asked him what was up, little buddy. Let me tell you guys, my heart broke. At that moment, my son asked me if it was enough to go to Golden Corral for his birthday in a month. A piece of me shattered inside. I didn't think he remembered Golden Corral. I told him we could go to the bank tomorrow and exchange it for cash. That night, I ugly cried in my bedroom. I felt like a failure because I couldn't give him everything he's ever wanted. I've begun researching furthering my education. Yesterday, as soon as the bank opened, I took my son, and we exchanged the money for cash. I then drove us to Golden Corral, despite it not being his birthday just yet. We were there for 2 hours. We got the all-you-can-eat buffet and it was 2 for $30. My kid was so happy, and I was stupid because I just assumed he forgot about this place. Today, I cried again in my room. I've never been good at saving money, but his birthday is next month, and I'm going to do my best to take him every few months. My sister's life is falling apart and I am happy. 40F, have been a long time lurker on Reddit. Never shared my story. This is a typical Reddit story you will hear, but I wanted to scream it to the world. Thank God, for Reddit. So, my sister, 43F, Ursula, yes I am using a villain's name, has always made my life a living hell. She is extremely manipulative and a narcissist. Ursula will be nice to me when she needed anything but then will ignore me. Growing up I always thought that we were really good sisters. We did not have the typical sister fights of one being jealous of the other. Now as an adult when I think about it, I think she has hated me. She would always give me backhanded compliments like your face looks better with your glasses. Or you have a boy crush? I thought you were a lesbian. I used to be a tomboy. Growing up I always strived to be like her. She was everyone's favorite. She was helpful and kind. Or at least that's how she made us believe. She would always make me feel insecure about my looks and people I date. The first boyfriend I had when I was 17. She made me believe that he was not good for me blah blah. I broke up with him. I know my fault. I moved out of state for college. My sister went to business school while I studied engineering. I would come home from holidays and would still have to hear all her backhanded compliments. When I was 21, I started dating my ex-husband, Jordan. My sister wasting someone else at that time, so I guess her focus didn't fall on Jordan. Also Jordan was not her type. We dated for 3 years and tied the knot. For 4 years I have been happy with my life. During that time my sister announces she is pregnant. We all thought she got pregnant by her then boyfriend, Remy. One day, I went to visit her and bring some food for pregnancy. She gave me a key to her place and I went inside without knocking. I had permission from her. The surprising thing I saw was Jordan's shoes outside. I went inside her bedroom because I was feeling a bit suspicious. And yeah, you guessed it. They were banging butt naked. Long story short, I divorced Jordan. I was still in pain and very devastated. My parents supported me but their focus shifted way more towards my sister and Jordan. Yes, she was pregnant with his child. It was painful to see them together. I never got a sorry from either of them. They were like shit happens. I moved away from home. 8 years ago, I got a contract to work in England. I moved there. It was a fresh start of my life. I met Peter who was a single dad. We fell in love and got married and have a son together. I don't have contact with my sister. I have very low contact with my dad who gives me all the insight. Jordan and Ursula got married and had 2 more kids. That's all I knew about them until recently. Jordan cheated on Ursula, and they are having a nasty fight. The cherry on top is that 2 of their kids is not Jordan's. So Ursula hasn't been faithful at all. My dad told me it is a mess. Jordan and Ursula will get a divorce but she is pressing for alimony. I hung up the phone and made myself a drink. I am glad I am thousands of miles away from all that drama. My mom had called me too and said that she needs me. I am not sure if I will go or not. As much as I enjoy seeing Ursula's life going to hell, I am not sure if I want to engage in that drama. My sister was cheating on Remy. Remy was a really sweet guy. He was very devastated when she heard my sister is not pregnant with his child, rather it was Jordan's. Remy moved on and had a wonderful wife afterwards. I still follow him on Instagram. My parents were mad at Ursula, but she has manipulated #TCH convinced everyone that Jordan coerced her and that he would divorce me if she didn't have sex with him. She made it seem like she is saving my marriage by fucking my husband lol. Classic. I got married in London. My relatives couldn't come because of the long distance but my father did. Mom couldn't come because at that time she had a back surgery. My dad and mom have a strained relationship with her and Jordan. They haven't disowned them because of their kids. My dad refused to walk Ursula down the aisle at her wedding, which I did not attend. I did kept them in contact after I moved to England. They were supportive of me. The reason my mom couldn't come to my wedding, as I mentioned, she had a back surgery. My mom is in her 60s, so she has a lot of health issues. My dad attended. My mom hardly could fly but she did visit me after my honeymoon. She was devastated because she couldn't meet my son because flying was difficult and then we had COVID. I am going to my hometown for some business. I would have gone either way regardless of the phone call. I haven't seen my mom and dad for 4 years now. I miss them. I do hate my sister but I do not hate my parent. What is the rudest thing you've said to a teacher? I'd hated this teacher all year, albeit respectfully. I signed up for the class thinking it was going to be taught by my favorite teacher, who she'd had a hand in getting fired. There was no official reason. He was asked to leave because despite winning a number of students' favorite teacher awards, the department didn't like him. She meanwhile, had only been out of Yale for a few years, and had only taught high school 1 year before. I took the class because I was busy, 4 APS, 3 season athlete, more extracurriculars, and it was supposed to be an easy class. She made it absolute hell. She assigned more reading than any class I'd ever had up to that point. She literally gave out more work than all 4 of my APs combined. Meanwhile, she was lazy as crap. She didn't do lesson plans. She'd show up to an 80-minute class with a rough idea of what she wanted to do, and then wing it, resulting in tons of wasted class time. She was never in her office to answer questions. Never, promptly, answered emails. And took ages to grade the essays she would constantly assign.
Grade was used loosely, as it was often arbitrary and or based entirely off of length. We actually tested this. My friend handed in a long paper about Batman. I handed in a well-written piece on a topic that was half as long. He got an A. I got a D. The rambling piece I wrote high, full of profanities, got a 97. Then she falsely accused me of cheating. For bringing in notes. On an open notes test. Because apparently open notes means only notes that were taken in class.
Because I'd done additional research on the book, I had an unfair advantage over other students, which constituted her submitting a case to the school disciplinary board, which had I been found guilty, would have gotten me kicked out of my dream college I had just gotten into, as well as suspended. When they cleared me for cheating, she accused me of plagiarism, for not citing the notes I didn't use on the test. Again, cleared. Although I hadn't liked her all year, I'd been respectful about it. Participated in class. A student. She didn't suspect I might have hated her until after the cheating incident, when I started showing up to class and not taking part in the discussions I usually led. Finally we get to May. AP season. Even though she's already far above the required number of essays she has to assign, she assigns a massive one on the first day of APs. To the Monday after APs, senior skip day. Which also covered prom weekend, the Saturday after APs. She was the only teacher in the department to assign an essay. Due to the way my schedule worked, I would have been able to stay home the last Friday of APs, after my 5 exams. Except for the email I got Thursday night from her saying there was an additional reading packet we needed for the essay due Monday. We needed to pick it up in school. I asked her if she could scan the packet. The English department had a scanner teachers often used, and she had admitted to forgetting to hand it out in class, and a number of people had my same schedule / wouldn't have otherwise had to come in. She said no. No explanation. So I came in, reluctantly. I had no intention of starting a fight. The year was almost over, and I honestly just wanted to be done with this class. So I knock on her door, walk into her office, one of the first times I've seen her at her desk, to pick up the packet, and the first thing she says is, "Do we have a problem?" Probably from the whole not talking thing. At that point I lost it. I never raised my voice, or directly insulted her. No profanities. But I was angry as fuck, and basically went off at her for about 5 minutes without letting her get a word in. Yes, we have a problem. I commuted a half hour into school on my day off, after 5 AP exams, to pick up a packet you forgot to hand out and were too lazy to scan for a ridiculously long essay you assigned over APs. Tired of hearing you brag about how you went to Yale and about how much money you make in class, tired of waiting months to get poorly graded papers back, included the Batman story, she had no memory of it plus a few more examples of crappy grading, tired of doing the ridiculous amounts of busy work you assign, and yes, I'm still angry you accused me of cheating. We both know I didn't cheat, the dean, agreed I didn't cheat. And even though we'd talked about it, and how submitting a claim put my entire future at risk over something trivial that had no effect on my grade, you submitted a claim anyways and almost got me kicked out of college. So yes, we have a problem. I grabbed the packet and walked out. I didn't look back. According to the crowd who was watching this in the hall through the glass door of the office, she broke down crying as soon as I left. After which, she got up, and filed a claim against me for, of all things, physically threatening her. The school investigated. Every other teacher in the office verified I never threatened her, verbally or physically. But they also said it was the most disrespectful conversation they'd ever seen a student have with a teacher. So I was suspended. And then hit by a car on the day I was out of school. And she became known as the teacher that broke my wrist.
My dead fiancé's family all want the ring he bought for me. So they took me to court. I was engaged to John, after dating for 4 years. When he proposed, the ring he used was 2 sizes too big. We went to the store that he bought it from and he kept the receipt. We got the right size and kept the same style. But 10 months after the proposal, John passed away in a car accident. I used the savings for the wedding to pay for his funeral. The day after the funeral, John's brother came to me asking for the ring. I asked why. His response was that the ring had been passed down their family for 5 generations. I told him that was BS because I have proof that the ring was bought for me, less than a year ago. We argued for a bit and he then stormed out. Then I get the calls from John's family, saying I'm a liar and demanding the ring. Then I got a letter from their lawyer. In the letter they also demanded that I reimburse them for costs of John's funeral. So I got myself a lawyer, showed the proof about the ring, and proof that I paid for the funeral. We went to court and I won. I thought that madness was over, until John's sister recently messaged me. She and her boyfriend are engaged, but haven't gotten a ring and she wants John's ring. After I said no, she went crazy and was messaging non-stop demanding. I have blocked her over and over, but she finds a way around it. I was having brunch with my friend, my mobile was on the table, a message from my sister popped up and my friend saw it. I explained the messages to her and my friend believes I'm a-hole and I should give her the ring. She told my other friends and they are all saying the same things. Now I'm doubting myself. So am I the a-hole? Edit. This ring is part of a company that designs jewelry based on movies and mass produces each style in different sizes. We got the right size and swapped it with style ring too. After the swap and when telling his parents about the engagement, I showed them the ring. John told them about where he brought it and about size swap. His parents never said anything about an heirloom ring and family diamonds. It was after the funeral when they started saying their great-great-great-grandparents were the ones that brought this ring and it's an heirloom. About funeral costs, John's parents messaged me about not being able to afford the funeral. My thoughts at the time was that the reason they couldn't afford it is because his sister is about to start college and put the wedding fund for good use, because the wedding isn't gonna happen anymore. I paid for everything for the funeral, the parents didn't pay at all. I guess during my grief/shock of John's death, might have made me forget that his family owned most of the business and housing accommodations in town. It was during court that I found out that he had life insurance. That money went to his parents and it was 2x the cost of his funeral. When I received their lawyer letter, I thought it might be fake. But I called my friend and I explained the situation to him. I asked him to check if this letter is real or fake. He told me to meet him with the letter and all my documents for the ring and funeral. He said the letter is real and he will help me. I thought that after their lawyer saw my proof, that would be the end of the madness. But next thing I knew, we were in court. Most of the time I was confused, but I just spoke the truth and showed all my proof. The judge awarded me to be reimbursed for funeral costs, legal fees, and emotional distress. On to his sister. In her first message asking for the ring, she said that John would want her to have it because it would feel like John is part of her next step in her life and let his spirit know he is not forgotten. Sister knows that the ring was brought by John, because she was at the engagement party. At the party, we told everyone how the proposal went and about swapping rings, due to size issues. I should have mentioned that the ring is Lord of the Rings themed and we were planning on a Lord of the Rings themed wedding, because we met at an LOTR event. I recall Sister telling John to change the ring to a Disney theme, her protests of our theme idea, and saying we should do a Disney wedding instead during the engagement party. As for the friend from brunch who saw the messages from his sister and told the others about this, they read his sister's first message asking for the ring. My friend believes that she has good, valid reasons for wanting the ring. They also believe that the ring should actually be used, not stuck in a box somewhere or most likely lost. I pointed out that I'd used the ring, I wore it during engagement, court madness with his family, and kept it on for a year after winning the case. Then only wearing the ring on his birthday and anniversary of our first meeting, when he proposed and when he died. My friend called me a sad, selfish a-hole and stormed off. Next thing I know, my other friend started messaging me about me being an a-hole and his sister should get the ring. After his sister's recent messages, I called my lawyer friend. I sent him screenshots of her messages and we have a meeting this week. I am also rethinking my friendship with the friends that say I'm a-hole and should give the ring to his sister.
I'm in love with my sister. I, 32, am in love with my former sister-in-law, 27. I'm finally at a point where I can't stand this anymore. I've been in love with this woman for a very long time, maybe a couple of years at this point, and I'm not sure if I should just stop it or attempt to make something with her. I met my ex-wife, her sister, when I was 23 years old and the relationship developed very quickly, and by 26 I had my son and daughter and had gotten married. However, within months of being married my ex-wife had an affair, but worse than that the man she cheated with had gotten her into substances. After confronting her on this she said she was going to get help, but instead she left in the night. I haven't heard from her in 4 years and last I've heard she's still with that guy and are homeless in Las Vegas. Not sure how true that is, but being focused on holding it together for the kids, I really don't have the time to chase her down, nor do I want to after what she pulled. I ended up getting a divorce in absentia. I did however maintain a very positive relationship with my in-laws after the fact. Every other weekend my kids stay over with their grandparents on that side and they pretty much treat me like a son still. I still go to parties at Christmas and I'm reasonably liked by the family. Nobody talks about my ex anymore, mainly to not worry my kids. My oldest, my son, is very hurt by his mother leaving. He's 9 now and I've had to get therapy for him after he told me he hoped his mother was dead. She had been getting verbally abusive toward the end, which was when he was around 5 or 6 anyhow. In the year following my ex leaving, her sister and her boyfriend had started coming around a lot to see the kids. They knew I worked a lot and would babysit and call it practice as they wanted to have children of their own. My kids loved them and were spoiled by them, which I didn't mind because we all needed a little positivity. They got married and were very in love. However, her husband was killed in a workplace accident shortly after the birth of their daughter. It has been extremely rough and painful for everyone involved, as one can imagine. I followed my sister-in-law's example and began to take her daughter to give her time to herself if things got too hard to deal with or she needed alone time. She's been in grief counseling for a few years, but she still wears her ring and has told me she can't ever imagine dating again. I talk to her about him frequently and she's gotten to a better place, but she's still very much in love with him. I can't imagine that sort of pain. Over the last 2 years we've been a more constant figure in each other's lives. My kids love their aunt and I have her over for dinner a couple times a week. My daughter and her daughter have become close and love being around each other, so they have sleepovers. I've moved on from my ex by this, but the idea of dating possibly someone dangerous as their mother has kept me out of the dating scene. I don't know when it happened, but slowly I began to get soft on my sister-in-law. She's a great mom for what she's had happen to her. She's one of the sweetest people I know and her sense of humor always leaves me laughing and happy. Then I started realizing that I'm physically attracted to her. I've always felt kind guilty about it because her late husband was a good friend, and since she's obviously is still grieving, so I've kept it to myself. Since the virus started we've been together a bit more because social distancing has had us lose contact with most other people. Nothing romantic has ever been discussed and I try not to flirt, but last week it was very late and after the kids went to bed I made us a few drinks, not enough to get drunk, but she decided she'd rather spend the night, so I took my couch. I woke up to breakfast this morning and the 4 of us felt like the sort of family I've always wanted. She even kissed my forehead, which is not something she normally does. I still didn't say anything, but after she left I found my son quietly playing with his toys in his room. He looked upset, so I asked him if he was alright. He tells me point blank in the way only a kid can that he wishes sister-in-law was his mother. I sat down with him and asked him why he thought that way, and he gave a whole bunch of reasons, her being nice to him, that she never yells about anything. He likes seeing her at his grandparents and she draws pictures with him, which I didn't know they did. By the end of it, my heart that is already melting for this woman even more wound up. When visiting, dropping them off with their grandparents, I tried to breach the subject with her folks to kind of feel around how people would see. I made a joke about she and I acting like a married couple sometimes, and they didn't laugh and were kind of standoffish, friendly, but either they know something or they disapprove. It's getting too hard for me to ignore or pretend it's not getting to me. I'm in love with her. Either I've got to stop it and find some way not to think of her, or I have to find some sort of way to navigate through this situation and tell her everything. If anybody out there has any insight on how to approach a widow, especially one who is married to a friend, with this sort of intention, I could really use your help.
My boyfriend gave me the ICK during a flight, so I broke up with him as soon as we landed. Let me start out by saying I know what I did might seem cold-hearted, but it's extremely important to me to have a strong, secure man as my partner. I'm sort of an impatient, unforgiving person, and I really only like giving people one chance and never looking back if they disappoint me. Anyway, all this took place when my boyfriend of a year and I decided to take a weekend trip to a warmer state. I love my boyfriend and we ended up having an amazing time. We laid on the beach and went clubbing, and it was one of the most exciting, enjoyable trips I've ever taken. The problem didn't arise until after we were on our way home. I strongly believe that traveling together, especially flying, is a great way to test out the strength of your relationship, since it can easily become a stressful experience. Well, we had some issues on our flight back since there was a hurricane in the area we were flying out of. Our flight was cancelled, then our new flight got delayed twice, so I was already tired and annoyed by the time we finally got on the plane. It turned out to be a plane ride from hell. It was storming as we were on the plane, and I could even see a huge lightning storm right next to the plane from my window. I have flown multiple times, but I've never experienced something like this midair. At one point the storm got really bad and our plane started shaking with serious turbulence. It was so bad at one point a lady who wasn't buckled in was tossed upwards from her seat and hit her head on the ceiling very hard. This woman started wailing and crying, and some other people started screaming and crying as well. The energy in the plane was very chaotic and scary. Yet, like I said, I've flown before, so I figured it would all be okay and I wasn't freaking out myself. But, when I looked over at my boyfriend, I saw that he had started crying too. Not just normal crying either, like full on. Little kid sobbing with a snotty nose and everything. Look, I know it was a scary experience, but he is a grown man, and in those situations, you need to stay calm or you'll make it worse for everyone. I didn't really feel bad for him at that moment, since I felt like he was just making things worse for himself. I also feel like he should have been more mature and not freaked out so easily. I just put my headphones in and tried to sleep the rest of the plane ride, which was hard because the plane kept shaking for almost a half hour after that. I felt my boyfriend nudge me a couple of times, but I felt like if I looked at his tear-stained face I wouldn't be able to stop myself from cringing. When we finally landed and I opened my eyes, my boyfriend looked like he had literally been crying the entire time, and his hands were full of tissues. This was just the icing on the cake, and it felt like all my attraction to him just disappeared the moment I saw all those balled up tissues. It was just pathetic. I knew the relationship was over before we even got off the plane. When we got to the baggage carousel and found our luggage, I just quickly walked away from him and called my own Uber. He looked confused and tried calling my name, but I just sent him a concise breakup text while I was in the Uber home. Again, I know this might seem heartless, but should I have really kept dating him after he had embarrassed me like that and revealed his lack of masculinity? I'm falling in love with my best friend's younger sister, please help. I wish I weren't in this situation in the first place, and I still can't believe this is even happening to me. I would do anything to be able to control my feelings, but they are growing stronger by the day. I have been friends with Ava, my childhood best friend, since we were both 8 years old. I have debilitating social anxiety, and before Ava and I became friends, I was bullied relentlessly by other children. But that all changed after we met. Ava stood up for me when other kids picked on me, and once in middle school, she even jumped a girl for calling me ugly. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. She broke the girl's nose and I realized I never had anyone care for me like she did. She is the best friend any girl could ask her, and I can't imagine what my life would have looked like without her by my side. I am very close with her family since we've been friends since we were kids. I don't have the best home life, so Ava's family really took me in and cared for me often when I was a child. I truly feel like part of their family. Ava has one sibling, a younger sister named Alana. Ava and I are 24, and Alana is 22. Me and Alana always butted heads as kids. She was a big girly girl, and I was always a strict tomboy. I never thought feelings could unfold between the two of us as adults. Anyways, Ava graduated early and has a high-paying job at a tech startup. Alana and I are still in school, and we actually attend the same college. We had a shared class for the very first time this semester, and I honestly groaned when Ava told me she would be in my class. As I said, Alana and I have totally opposite personalities. She is very cheery and bubbly, meanwhile I'm pretty quiet and secluded. Fast forward to the first week of school, I was genuinely surprised when Alana turned out to be a great classmate. She is much brighter than I ever guessed she would be, and she helps out other classmates during downtime. It was during this class that I started to like her personality as I saw more of it. She was always in a cheerful mood and would honestly light up the room every time she walked in. Eventually, Alana and I started studying together. Sometimes we would study at her house since I was there all the time anyway, But as the semester went on, we studied in a quiet corner of the library together. We were just sitting there, studying one day, when I looked over at her and saw her biting her nails. I pulled her hand out of her mouth and told her to stop that, and she gave me this sly little smile and sat on her hands for the rest of the study session. I don't know what it was about that little gesture, but when she smiled at me like that, it was like a tiny firework went off in my chest. At that moment, I realized how tender and beautiful she was. It was a dizzying feeling, and when we walked out of the library that night, I knew I would never see her the same. I kept my feelings hidden, but as we kept spending time together, I only fell for her harder. At first, I thought it was just me, but out of nowhere, Elena slowly started acting really flirty with me. I chalked it up to us getting closer, but she would text me often and make constant excuses to touch me. When we met up to study, she made it a habit to sit right next to me, close enough that our thighs were touching. One day she even put her leg up on mine, and during a late-night study session, she literally fell asleep on my shoulder. Everything came to light one night in the library. She was sitting right next to me as usual, and I made a joke that made her laugh really hard. The next thing I knew, she was leaning close to me, telling me how much she loved hanging out with me. We looked into each other's eyes and stopped laughing. I restrained myself, but Elena didn't. She grabbed me like she wasn't a foot shorter than me, and kissed me hard. I couldn't help it. How could I? I kissed her back, and we made out in the library for 45 minutes straight. It was the most tense, erotic moment of my life up until that point. Afterward, we both felt sort of guilty and overwhelmed, yet giddy. We had a long conversation afterward, where we both spilled our guts about our feelings for each other. We decided we wanted to be together, but we agreed that the first person to know had to be Ava. We spoke about how she might react. I thought she would accept us since Ava has always been so supportive of me, but Elena expressed extreme nervousness. She said that Ava was very protective over her and was usually pretty hard on anyone she dated. We decided to start dating that night, and settled on telling Ava the very next day. Looking back, I wish we had kept our relationship a secret for long. Before she died, my husband's best friend revealed his devastating secret to me. I'm not heartless, and I feel sorry for the dead woman involved her, but her passing doesn't invalidate my feelings. I've been with my husband for about 5 years now. He's a strong, stoic man and I loved him all my heart. Our marriage has been lovely up until all of this came out. I could have never thought that he could be hiding something this huge from me all along. My husband had a best friend named Carol. They had known each other since they were children. He has other male friends but no one came close to Carol. They spoke every day and she spent a lot of time at my house. She was always so kind to me. She would help me around the house and even watch our son sometimes. I trusted her, and we developed a friendship of our own. I can't explain the mixture of pain and grief I feel when I think back to all our memories together. It all happened out of nowhere, truly a freak accident, but the other week my husband got a call from Carol's family that she had been in a bad car accident. Unfortunately, she did not survive. The police say she must have lost control of her car while crossing a bridge, and she drowned in the water beneath. My husband and I both grieved together at the funeral. Like I said, at that point, we both had deep, meaningful friendships with her. The world lost an incredible woman the day she died, but I wish my memory of her had never been tainted like it is now. The weeks after Carol's death were excruciating not only for me but for my husband as well. I know they had been close, and she was important to him, but her death completely changed my husband's entire personality. He became extremely depressed. He took a month's leave from his job and just stayed in bed day after day and cried. I was getting more worried about him as time went on and he seemed to be getting worse, not better. It's like he just decided to stop being a husband and a father, almost like he died the same day that Carol did. About a month and a half after Carol's death, I received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, and it was addressed to me alone, not my husband. My husband was upstairs, still rotting in bed as he had been, as I read the letter on the couch by myself downstairs. There might as well have been a live grenade hidden inside that plain white envelope, because its contents had altogether obliterated any stability I once had in my life. The letter was from Carol. She must have sent it before she passed. She began the letter by explaining that she had been battling depression for years, and that there was no light at the end of the tunnel. At first, my heart broke for her. After all, she was my friend too. I loved her. But towards the end of the letter, Carol tore through my sympathy by confessing that she and my husband had been having an on and off affair since before he and I were married. I sunk to the floor as I finished this letter. It was like my legs just gave out and I couldn't carry myself anymore. I was shell-shocked. My head was spinning as he finished the last couple lines of the letter. This is where Carol revealed that her death had been no accident, and that she had decided to take her own life after my husband told her he would never leave me for her. She ended the letter with an apology to me, saying that she should have never put me through this, and that she deserved to die. I had never had my life altered so intensely in just a couple of minutes. My life ended when the letter did. I just sat there on the floor for what felt like hours. Nothing felt real. When my son got home from school that day, I just packed our bags and took him to my parents. I've been staying with them for almost an entire week, and my husband still hasn't reached out to me. I wonder if he cares where we are, where I am, but but I guess he never really cared about me at all. My landlord was watching me through a peephole, so I blinded him. I reached the end of my rope when it came to dealing with abusive, perverted men, and I'm happy I made at least one of these types of men pay for his behavior and suffer for it for the rest of his life. If I could do it all again, I would in a heartbeat. I'm a 22-year-old female college student. I recently moved into a new apartment after escaping an abusive relationship. We lived together and I was being hurt physically on a daily basis. I knew I needed to get out fast, so I signed a lease for the first place I could afford. Like I said, I'm a college student, so I couldn't afford a very nice place on my own. I moved into a crappy little rundown apartment building. When I first met my landlord, I thought something seemed off about him. He seemed like a really weird old man. I could have never guessed just how perverted and effed up this man actually was. I found out after I signed the lease that he actually lives in the unit right next to mine, and the couple of times I've seen him in the hall he always stares at me without blinking or saying a word. I uncovered an ugly truth about my apartment this week, and I wish I never moved into this awful unit. I was in my bathroom blowing out my hair after a shower, when I noticed a hole drilled in the wall about the size of a dime. I can't believe I never noticed it before. It's right next to my shower. I looked into it and saw an eye staring back at me. I realized the hole had been drilled in the wall I shared with my landlord, and I started shaking as I realized I must have been being watched by him for God knows how long now, maybe since I moved it. Of course, I wanted to call the cops, to pack my stuff up right there, but honestly, times are so rough right now and I do not have the means to move right now, let alone afford a whole new place. I had enough of men harassing me, abusing me, and using me. This incident made a switch flip in my brain, and instead of calling the cops, I decided to take revenge into my own hands. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a college student and I happen to be a chemistry major, so I have access to a full lab of dangerous chemicals. The next day while I was on campus, I loaded a special type of spray bottle with a small amount of sulfuric acid. I knew I was going far with my revenge, but I didn't care in the slightest. I knew this old pervert deserved to pay. The next time I took a shower, I acted normal. I didn't care that he was certainly watching me. It would be the last thing he ever saw with that eye. Halfway through my shower, I quickly lined up the spray bottle of acid with the peephole, and pulled the trigger. I immediately heard my landlord scream and collapse on the other side of the wall. I laughed to myself and he kept screaming and screaming. Finally, my other neighbors called the ambulance after all the screaming, and we all gathered outside to watch them take him away on the stretcher. Before he was bandaged up, I saw blood leaking from his burned eye. His eye looked like a bloody raisin sitting in his eye socket. I made conversation with the EMT, and asked if my landlord was going to be alright. The EMT said he'd be fine, but he would bet money that he had totally lost that eye. I had to restrain myself from smiling, and I just hope he comes home and looks through the peephole with the other eye.
My husband kept photos of his now dead ex-wife, so I destroyed them. You guys are right. The guilt hit me so hard. Seeing my kids all sad and devastated. Basil was so distraught about his grandfather's dagger and his picture with his mom. He sometimes will break down crying because he always tell his dad and my mom is the prettiest lady. Or mom was the kindest lady. Bertie was still sad because she thought she lost or misplaced Zipper, her mother's childhood stuffed zebra. She sometimes couldn't sleep without Zipper. She would still come to sleep on me, as she sees me as her mom. Ale was upset thinking he left all of his memories of him and Lorraine behind and could never get them back. He's sad Bertie would never know much about her mother Lorraine or didn't have any pictures of her mother. Or give her collection on antique horses. We'll never know the letters she wrote for Bertie and Basil.